Yeah, so let's dance. Yeah, it's me, the wolf. Not so old tonight. Starting tonight off with a little bit of Phantom High, and I thought it was appropriate since we're going to be dancing with wolves. So let's dance. A really cool cover of David Bowie. One of the tracks that I've really been digging from them, and we're going to get into some of the other tracks later. Again, Dancing with Wolves. I always like to start these things off with that little disclaimer thing so I can get all my fuckity fucks out of the way. The views, thoughts, expressions, comedy, satire, and otherwise expressed by this particular host are his and his alone, unless you should choose to share with it, and it's yours for free. Otherwise, if you might be triggered, fuck off. But seriously, we try and embrace a dynamic of acceptance, tolerance, love, unless you're going to come in here and float that Nazi bullshit. But outside of that, yeah, it's pretty much all cool. That's what we do. That's what I do. So in a little while, I'm going to have Peril on. I'm going to let her speak about the class of Phantom High. And, you know, those of you who know me have been following me. I'm really big on words, language. That's what fucks us up, but that's where magic is born. Because that's where we frame our intent. That's where we frame our motive and purpose. I see my sister Leah out in the audience. All love, sister. Great to see you. Truly, I appreciate all the love and support. And let me tell you, the past week has been crazy. Crazy with love, crazy busy, and crazy good. A lot of stuff going on, not only between, you know, the podcast here and what Shia and I do, but with the radio station WRFZ, putting together shows, promoting, spreading the word, and to the best of our ability, also trying to make a difference. Because in the end, that's what really defines us. The running joke is, yeah, you can teach a fucking parrot to say anything. Okay? What does it really mean? Doesn't mean anything. It's a fucking parrot. It's copying. My brother Jonathan Porter, he knows. He and I have worked on music together. He and I have hung out together. We've broken bread and partaken of things. They were good things, too. But we also saw some funky, freaky shit down there in fucking Atlantic City. Let me tell you, I was talking with my brother Ed Contini. He's one of the radio DJs and a dear, dear friend of mine here in Rochester. You know, the problems that are going on, they're fucking everywhere. You know, Atlantic City was like, I don't know, man, it was like something out of a bad Mad Max movie. Don't get me, we know how to roll. I'm an old school wolf. So I was just like, okay, we're living in the apocalypse. I've already prepared for this. But man, the looks on some of those folks' faces when we were coming up and down the boardwalk, people just running away with their kids in fear, junkies swinging from the lampposts. You know what I mean? It was a fucking freak show. And John and I went across the country last year. We did the Arts for Autism event down to the Jersey Shore. My brother, Tony Rodriguez, and I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute or two. I don't want to get too caught up, but yeah, it doesn't matter if it's Memphis. It doesn't matter if it's Rochester, Toronto, okay, New Orleans. We were in New Orleans. Let me tell you, they got it fucking worse, okay? People are fucking living under the goddamn freeways. Hard. And I mean, like, large-scale encampments. It's fucking insane. And yes, they are a really cool band. Not unlike Bonded by Darkness. I see my sister, Raven O'Reilly, dancing out there. Love your sister. Tell brother Josh, I'm sure he's probably shot out by now. I know he's busting his ass, but tell him much love. And, these are some of the people that have come into our circle and our world, and shit's taken off. Not just from, like, the witchy shit that Jaya does, but from the music stuff. All kinds of things happening. Too much to talk about, but tonight we're going to talk about the class of Phantom High. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, I want to shout out a little bit of promo stuff before we get Peril on the phone. Yes, as my lovely Shia says, we lift each other up and we all fly higher. But not unlike the flight of Icarus, don't get too fucking close. You burn up and you crash. I'm just saying. I'm a wolf. We weren't meant to fucking fly. So, soon as we get to a certain height, I'm like, yeah, no, this ain't fucking for me. Don't get me wrong. I love you all. You want to fly up there. I'm cool down here. But I have to fuck with my witch. She knows that's how it is. We got that cheeky kind of relationship. So yes, couple of things. All right. First thing I'm going to talk about, and this was no, I won't go fucking fly. You know what? Fucking Jonathan, take that skydiving shit and fucking smoke it. We're not even going to play this game. Don't distract me. Okay, live podcast time. So sometimes you have a conversation with somebody an hour before the show and you realize they're really cool and you got a lot in common. And one of the beautiful things about all these circles now that are coming together is I have a lot of respect. I have a lot of friends across the lake here in Canada, Toronto, and other places in Canada. And I really dig the music scene out there. And one of the bands that I got turned on to was Phantom High. And they're a fucking great band. Really dig the sound. And I really respect the way Peril's approaching it, because it takes courage as far as I'm concerned. Again, we'll talk more about that. But one of the people that popped up into my social media stuff, because it's in her social media stuff, was a young lady by the name of Tams Rabia. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right. So if I fucked it up, you can let me know. And yeah, I'll get it right next time. And a little thing, Blacktooth Grin Productions. Okay. Write that down, boys and girls. You're going to be hearing more about that. Okay. But they've got a show that they're putting together across the lake, and it's for a really great reason. And again, this is why I'm compelled when I encounter people that are trying to actually do shit for other people, not just fucking talk about it, not just to stroke their egos or jerk themselves off, but actually really trying to fucking do something to promote not only the scene, but help people. Yeah, I'm all over that. So as promised, Tams, Horns Up, a celebration of life for Tom Care. It's going to be Sunday, August 20th, hosted over at the Rock Pile there. There's going to be some really cool bands. There's going to be karaoke, auction, raffles, okay? And it's for a really good cause. So keep in mind, you know what I mean? We all can't always go everywhere. And she was like, well, you guys are over the lake. Yeah, we're over the lake. But you know what? I got followers and friends in fucking Australia, England, Texas, Oklahoma, all over the place. We do travel. People do travel. And this is how we spread the word of mouth. You know what I mean? We cross over. We actually go across the lake. We go into Canada. So, we may very well, show up just to But we can promote it. We can talk about it. I'll put it on the radio station. Those of you out there that are listening, that are in that area, yeah, show them some love. Okay, these are people who are trying to actually make a difference. Okay, that's important these days. As I said to her, and I talk about this a lot, and I'll keep talking about it, if we don't take care of each other, who the fuck will? Another thing I want to shout out is this guy here, and this is Eli, all right? Brother Eli, okay, and his sister. And again, these are the little things. Lorena, this is for you because you asked me. Sometimes shit goes sideways. So long story short, Eli was supposed to be back home on June 23rd on a Greyhound bus from Kansas City. He never got on the bus. He hasn't called or texted. His sister, Jess Colburn, is losing her fucking mind, and rightfully so, because people, okay, unfortunately sometimes disappear. Things happen. The system is not pretty and kind, and there are people out there suffering. Now, before you ask, yes, the Kansas City Police Department is already involved, okay? But if you know anything, if you know somebody who knows something, Jess Colburn, okay, she's on Facebook. She's putting it out there. She's asked people to spread the word, and people that know her and are friends with her and Eli and stuff, guess what? That's what we're going to do. We're going to try and pass the word out as best we can. That's how we do it. So please check that out on Facebook. And again, if you're out in the Kansas City area and you see Brother Eli, tell him to get his fucking ass home. Call his sister. Okay? Let's try and take care of each other. Now, the final little promo I'm going to do is a little personal one. Those of you, again, that know me know that I dance in a lot of different circles. So I'm proud to say that I'll be out July 21st at the Batavia Downs Casino with the Marshall Tucker Band. And we're doing this in conjunction with WRFZ, Rochester Free Radio. These guys are some really cool guys. They're not, a lot of people are like, oh, they're a country band. Yeah, they got some country, but they got some fucking rock. They got blues. Doug Gray is the epitome of the Southern gentleman. All right. Chris Hicks, the rest of them, they're really cool guys. I've known these guys for years. My brother, Chris Miller, Susie Q and Shia, we're all going to go out there. We're going to support that show. We're going to interview them. And again, this is how we build the bridges. Okay. By interacting sometimes with, people who quote unquote have names, it gives us, the smaller, lesser people, an actual opportunity to get our music out there, to get our causes out there. And together, we can make a difference. Listen, I know a lot of people who are named people, okay? And not all of them are ego assholes. Some of them are fucking ego assholes, and tonight I'm not going to out them. I'm not going to be that wolf. But these guys right here, these guys are the real fucking deal. These guys still travel around the country on a fucking bus, bringing their music to people, doing things. They're involved, and I'm proud to be out there with them to share this. So July 21st, you want to come meet the wolf, you want to come hang out, you want to meet the witch Shia, you want to make fun of Chris Miller's tattoos, Susie will appreciate that. Yeah. July 21st, Batavia Downs, New York, Marshall Tucker Band. Now again, now that we've got all that groovy shit out of the way, and I see the Goblin Queen has arrived. It's actually pretty funny because we have some folks that have been in our circle for a few years now. And listen, life takes us in different directions. We have, families and kids. And Chanel, a.k.a. the Goblin Queen, and her kids have been a big part of that journey. So much love to you, sister. And holy fucking shit, we got to hold the phone because my brother Jack Steinley is in the fucking house. Oh my God. Listen, this is my brother right there, Jack Steinley. Remember that fucking name. This is the guy, okay, that makes the shows that people go to happen. He's the guy that hangs from fucking 2,000 feet in the air by his ball sack to make sure that the lights don't shine in your fucking eyes. Okay? He's the guy that makes sure all those mountains of speaker are set up right so they don't explode and set you all on fire. Okay? My brother Jack, damn, I miss you. I love you. It is so good to see you. Tell Sherry I love her too, but not as much as you. Okay? Just to piss her off because I can do that. Because I'm betting she's hanging in the wings somewhere. She's lurking somewhere in the shadows. And tell Mama I love her the most. Okay? That'll really piss her off. See, that's the kind of guy I am. But much love. Listen, these are my family. Okay? These are people I love. So it is great to see you. All right. So we're going to cut to another track from Phantom High, and I'm going to get Peril on the phone, and I'm going to let her speak for herself because she has a lot to offer. So this next one is entitled Ambiguous. So sit back and enjoy, and then we'll be back live with Peril of Phantom High. So yeah, welcome back. That was Ambiguous by Phantom High. As Chanel just said, they sound like In This Moment and Korn. That's an interesting comparison. And I have Peril on the phone. Peril, what do you think? One of our listeners out there says, you sound like In This Moment and Korn.
I would say that's right on the mark. I mean, that's kind of our target demographic that it was hard for us to put ourselves into a box, but of course those are, especially Korn is a massive influence. I think In This Moment is, we lucked out, but that's definitely, that genre is kind of the one that we've tried to stick with because, they make you kind of put yourself in a box to define yourself. So In This Moment is exactly where we're trying to be, at least for the time being. We don't want to run in anybody's tracks. And, Ambiguous, that song, even though it got released, I think 3 or 4 years ago, I actually wrote that song in 2014. So a lot of the stuff that is just released, over the last few years has actually been in our catalog for a while. So I can definitely see where I was at the time when I wrote a lot of that stuff, and it would definitely be, I was listening to Korn, Deftones, Brian Head Welsh's band Love and Death, Motionless in White, and definitely In This Moment falls into that category as well. So yeah, that's a great.
Yeah, she definitely hit that. Well, that was a good one, Chanel. You made a good point too, because music, at least in my experience as a musician, and you and I have talked about this offline, really is reflective not only sometimes of in the moment, no pun intended, but also the things that we've been exposed to, good or bad, indifferent or otherwise. So we always kind of have little pieces of that will kind of play out. I started the show off because it really kind of felt right. The show's called Dancing with Wolves. So I was like, I'm going to play your version of Let's Dance. And I thought that was a really neat kind of adaptation. You stayed true to the arrangement and stuff, but you brought your translation into it. And that's one of the things I like about what you guys really love about what you guys are doing. You're not afraid to push the envelope. You're like, this is who I fucking am. If you don't like it, you better fucking run away.
Yeah, for sure. And, with the covers that we do, I get that a lot where people are like, wow, it's really different, but you somehow also captured the energy. And I think it's more from an emotional standpoint. When I'm remaking these songs, I won't remake a song just to remake it. I'll only remake it if I feel that there's something that we can add to it. But everything that we add to it is something I was kind of already hearing when it resonated with me. So it's just really an extension of my interpretation of what I felt. So
it has to have relevance to you personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And the David Bowie song, that's a lot of people that are Bowie fans are like, 80s synth pop Bowie. I don't dig it as much as,
Listen, I've listened to Merciful Fate. I hang out with Marshall Tucker, and I love David Bowie. You know what I mean? Because David Bowie is, again, another great example. He wasn't afraid to just be like, hey, I'm going to do this. I hope people like it. I will share it with you. But if you don't like it, it's not my fucking problem. This is what I do. This is how I express myself.
Yeah, and you have to. You have to push the envelope, because if you're coloring inside the lines, like, everybody's already done that. David Bowie already wrote that song. So why try and remake it and sound like David Bowie? And, just like anything else, why travel in the tracks of other people and then expect to be recognized as any type of an artist? And
but here's the thing. Listen, you and I both know, because you're a guitar player as well too, and that's one of the things I really thought was cool. You're not just a singer, you're not just a performer, you're a musician. And anybody that knows music history knows that every band since the beginning of bands would always have pieces of the past or the things that were relevant. You know, Jimi Hendrix famously 2 weeks after Sgt. Pepper was released performed Sgt. Pepper. Led Zeppelin would play old blues tunes. You know, every band, Soundgarden, you know what I mean, Godsmack, you name it, has always used that, especially within the dynamics of performing live. It's honoring the past. It is, as you said, you know, representing what it means to us. Because, you know, you could write a song. You could write a song, let's say, like Suicide, that I'm going to play a little bit later. And it has a very particular meaning for you. You wrote it in reflection in that. But how it's going to translate to anybody else, that's on them. That's the beautiful thing about music. So they may have a completely different take on it, but it's still going to mean something to them. And that's where I think the real magic of music happens, you know, versus the cookie cutter, hey, let's just fucking throw something out there and, you know, kind of hide it behind something else.
You know, and it's why books resonate with people stronger than the movies that they make of books. I mean, yeah, you're squashing everything into a smaller amount of time, so there's details and things, nuances that you can't hit, but also because, and that's why I try not to tell people what they should be, you know, experiencing or taking away from the lyrics I write. I mean, if you ask me, I'll tell you. It's not like a mystery or anything, but I also leave it as ambiguous, no pun intended, as possible, because I want people, you know, I write these songs. When I'm writing these songs, I am thinking of all the times in my life where people that I looked up to, mentors in music and people that got me through certain periods in my life, I'm thinking of what those people meant to me. And the highest honor, the only thing I honestly give a shit about is that some people hear something that I did and maybe that resonates, you know, with them the way that something resonated with me. And if it's something that they can lean on or get, that's the highest form of compliment. And that's really,
no, that's, you know, very well said.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things, and I'll be honest, in my experiences in my travels, I use the old wolf again as a persona, but it also actually is this kind of weird thing. I was telling Tams, I really am kind of a wolf. I don't like humanity as a whole, if you dig what I'm saying, but I really love and I protect those humans that come into my circle that, you know, that I bond with, that I love, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So it's this kind of double-edged sword, and you're very unapologetic about it. You're very, very blunt, very direct about what you're doing and how you're presenting it. You know what I mean? You have an incredible presence, but it also, and I'm sure for a lot of people, and I'm sure you've already experienced it, it's fucking triggering because most people can't handle that. They don't want it. You know what I mean? Because it makes it look at themselves first and foremost. But I noticed, like, you know, your Exorcist performance, you know, you hit on some dynamics of things that, you know, people just tend to lose their fucking minds over.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. And that's the, you know, that's part of it too, is have you ever heard a band that everybody liked or did all of the right things that was worth a shit? Because to me, that's just boring.
Oh, no, and listen, I was part of the old Metal Militia crew when fucking Metallica was coming up and we were hanging out at fucking L'Amour's and, you know, it was a shitty, dirty place, but the music and the scene was incredible because it was raw, it was real, and it was based kind of like almost like the early punk scene to some degrees. It had this reflection of some of the disconnect, some of the bullshit, as they say, because a lot of your stuff, you know, has that darker element and it reflects your struggles within it.
Well, and another thing too to think about is I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I'm in my middle age right now. So I have a foot, you know, in the old school.
I'm the fucking old wolf. You're preaching to the choir. I refuse. Listen, here's the beautiful thing for you and I both. Keith Richards is still doing it. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, we're still children in comparison. We're still younger than Metallica. So trust me when I say it's a state of mind. Don't get me wrong. When the body just says, hey, fuck you, it hurts. I get that part. But the mindset, now we're the ones that have to set the stage for the future now.
Absolutely. But in saying, you know, like the compliment that you gave me earlier, it's because all of those bands that you mentioned, you know, Metallica and all, I was young, but I was there when those bands started happening. So all of those things that resonated, you know, there was a point when I started to decide to try and put this band together. You know, this wasn't my first attempt, but this particular one started around 2016. And I was just looking at the scene at the time, you know, and there was a dry spell, I think, you know, probably like 2012 to 2016, where I wasn't hearing anything that I liked. And everything was just kind of like cut and paste, or if there were combined influences, they were too easy to hear, you know, to the point where there were bands coming out with songs that were essentially older songs, but just rewritten with different lyrics. And I hated that. And so a lot of what I attempted to do, you know, my mantra going into this was to create and manifest the things that I missed from the older generations of music, but also where they fell short in the newer generations. So my mission was kind of to take and amalgamate those different things, like take all of the best things so that, you know, older listeners have something that resonates, but also younger listeners hear enough of the things that they like. And, you know, maybe it's enough to unite some of that, I guess, for lack of a better description.
No, that's beautifully said. And one of the things that coincides with it, you know, because you and I both have danced through different circles over the years. We're about the same age. And a lot of people talk a really good talk, but you don't just do that. You've been producing, you've been engineering, you've been mixing, mastering. You have made it a point. You do it all. You know what I mean? You haven't just thrown it out there into the cookie cutter machine and say, okay, you know, you have made it a point to be like, I'm going to control what I'm putting out there so that it is, to the best of its ability, the purest representation. And I know we were talking before we came on, you actually just went down to Tennessee to record some new stuff. So why don't you tell me about that and how that correlates, you know, with having, you know, really been producing and engineering your stuff for as long as you have?
Yeah, you know, and just briefly to broach that, in 2006, I was living in Orlando, and, you know, I was homeless. I was living out of a Chrysler LHS with a 7-string guitar, an amp head, and no cabinet, and my cat. And just all I had was the dream of, you know, just putting something together. I was listening to Korn and Linkin Park and Papa Roach and, you know, the Queen of the Damned soundtrack and different things.
I love that one, yeah.
And, you know, I was just like, I'm living for this. And I made it. I came back home to Canada to reset with my family. I stayed for 2 years on the East Coast, and then we put a band together, and I moved to Toronto. One of the things that I found was that we were just being charged out the ass all the time for production, engineering, all of that type of stuff, and it just sucked. So, you know, nobody got it. Nobody got the vision. And so around 2010, I decided I am tired of all of this shit, and I'm going to take everything out of the people that are holding me back. I'm going to take everything out of their hands.
You took your power back. You found your magic, as they say.
And I had to take a digression. I was just a guitar player at the time. I had never sang before in my life. And I just started, I didn't even know how to turn on a session in Logic to record. And I proceeded to put about 28 to 30,000 hours behind the console every day, 7 days a week, sometimes 10, 15 hours a day. I gave everything until the point where I was able to make things, at least a reasonable facsimile of what it was that I heard from the bands that I liked. And, that's one of the reasons I'm so unapologetic about what I do, because, man, I fucking went through it, and I cried. There were days that we came home and went to bed at, like 5 PM, and not because we were tired, just because we were emotionally exhausted for the amount of money that we had invested in trying to lift this off the ground. And so, everything up until around 2021, everything you're listening to is stuff that I produced and I mixed and I recorded, and I wrote it, recorded it, mixed it, and put it out. And then we found a band, Seven and I, the guitar player, and we just started trying to do it. But I got to a point where I just, as good as the writing is and the creative aspects, I am not an engineer. I have no foundation in that. I don't master. I'm not somebody, so we decided to try and find professionals to do that, and it just worked out poorly. So Nashville was me looking at the middle tier of production. Producers that had worked with bands that I loved, but, weren't at the level of, say, Rick Rubin, right? So because we can't afford Rick Rubin because we're poor.
Listen, you're preaching to the choir. I know. Listen, I started doing it for the same reasons. And part of it for me was the pandemic. Nobody was doing shows. There was nowhere to perform. I was trapped in the fucking house, and I was like, I have to make music. And, again, the technology's out there. You have to spend a lot of time. Now, I'm used to, being in studios and dealing with it. So I at least had, a degree of a foundation, and, being a musician, I knew to, like you said, how I wanted things to sound. But again, you made a reference to like how things were done before, the old stuff. Back in the day, a lot of the most beautiful music that was ever recorded was recorded on 4-track machines. You know what I mean? That look like an old Nintendo system these days. So there's a case to be made that, the music, if the music isn't good, it doesn't matter how much you fucking engineer it.
Yeah. It's just got to be. It just has to be the conviction, I guess. The conviction has to be there, whatever that conviction is, whether it's angst or whether, whatever the mood is, whatever the vibe is, whatever the genre is. If the conviction isn't there, if you don't hear it and you don't believe that person means that shit when they say it, it's worthless.
Well, it comes out too. I mean, there is a case to be made, and, some people will disagree with this. I know a lot of technical musicians. I'm sure the technical musicians, what I'm talking about. They can play anything note for note. Yeah. But when you don't have the ability to connect your emotions, and that includes the deepest, darkest shit imaginable, your music will not carry the same magic. It won't carry the same impact, because in my, again, I translate it like this. It's two-dimensional. Technical is two-dimensional. The other dimensions, and there's a myriad of dimensions that you can go into, requires that connection. And that's what destroys people. You look at Kurt Cobain, you look at Chester, you look at Chris Cornell, the list goes on and on and on, because it does tend to, when you dance in the darker areas, if you don't know what the fuck you're doing, or if you're in a bad place, it will fuck you up.
Well, a lot of artists are the strength of their articulation and the things that they manifest is rooted in empathy. And if you are empathic to the point where you write stuff like Kurt Cobain or Chester, or, pick your favorite artist that, espouses whatever you want to hear, they're probably fucking tormented. And
well, I mean, I think you have some of that. I'm going to be honest. I would put you in that category because, I mean, again, and don't take this wrong. I work with a lot of different musicians. I listen to a lot of different music. I played with a lot of different musicians. I'm not an A-list guy. I don't want to fucking be an A-list guy, because I see what fucking happens to people when they go too far down that rabbit hole. for me, some of the dynamic too, I was a single father, so I had a kid to raise. So I kind of cut out of the scene for a long time and didn't come back around to it until I took him out on the road and he was my rhythm guitar player. You know what I mean? So that's just how it played out for me. But I know from my experience, and you used a good word, empathy. You can read certain things. Again, I talked about in the beginning of your show, you can teach a parrot to recite words. It can mimic. But that, the action behind it is missing, and words without action, they're fucking empty. They're illusions. They're smoke and mirrors. It's gaslighting. It's whatever you want to fucking call it. But it's really worthless. And what's worse, I think, and this is part of what's affecting the music scene over there by you and us as well as too, people are, they're conditioned. They want the cookie cutter. You know what I mean? They want to some degrees the illusion. It's like the Matrix. They don't want to come out. They want to fucking stay in there. So it makes it harder.
It's a weird time. It's definitely a weird time. And, post MP3, when, I'm not for fat cats or any of the things you hear, like labels to make money. Like, there was an unfair system in place with that as well. But what you see happened is that they're always going to make their money off the top. And so when record sales went away, they started taking it from other places. And some of those other places were, we aren't going to work with 5 different people in a band writing material and try and corral 5 different people and their emotions and the things they want. We're going to find one person that has an existing demographic that buys their stuff, an established name. We're going to turn them into a brand. We're going to buy hit songs from Max Martin. We're going to have studio musicians come in and play them, if any, and we're going to release it to a base that is, and what happened was, a long enough period of time went on in the music industry where the people who knew how to make unique music and develop bands and things like that, they timed out. They retired, they quit, they left the industry. And what happened was, by the time they realized that the supply and demand curve of aesthetic or looks and marketability versus content had really shifted uncontrollably for lack of content, it was really too late, and it left them scrambling, trying to figure out how to get things. Because, if you look at Max Martin, for example, he's a writer. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I am. I know it. Listen, I know exactly where you're coming from. I'm just sitting here thinking, it's like, damn, your shit.
Thank you. You have to, right? If you're going to consider yourself any type of anything.
Oh, listen, I work with some name artists. I get it. We have to dance through all kinds of fucking hoops and things. And listen, there are some people, and I'll be blunt, despite their success, they have made the conscious effort to stay connected. And I think that there's, at least now, really beginning a new, call it the underground birth again. And this is how it happens. This is what happened in the late 40s. It happened in the 60s. It happened in the 70s with the punk scene, the metal scene. You and I both know it goes in cycles. But there is a really deep need and desire to get back to some of those things. And we've been producing, like you, we're just producing our own fucking shows, and we're working with the people that, really kind of have, they define themselves. We'll give anybody the benefit of the doubt, but you and I both know there are certain little things that, it's like poker. Once a person plays a card a particular way, you know what I mean? Because when people aren't real, they can't maintain the illusion. So it's just a question of time before they fuck up and the mask comes off and you're like, okay, you're really a Nazi in disguise. Thank you. Now and we can fucking move on. And now you're out the door.
Yeah. And if it truly means anything to you, and if making those connections and being however you want to define an artist, if those things really matter to you, you better dig fucking deep and figure out like who you are and how you're going to be who you want to be and it requires some unconventional thinking, and it requires a lot of studying, just like anything else, because, you know, there's people that luck out, but the real talent is looking like you've lucked out, even though you've had to work in the trenches for 10, 15, or 20 years to develop what it is.
Oh, absolutely. Right. But also some of it is probably expectational, because we've created, you know, again, unfortunately, and this is part of that conditioned element, I think, and I've heard a lot of people talk about it, you know, this American Idol thing that, you know, you have to have this type of success to be somebody. You have to look a particular way. You got to act a particular way, you know, all these bullshit illusions that they throw out there to kind of keep people corralled and confused and disconnected and stuff. But the real reality is, as long as you can find the balance that works for you, you know, I'm blessed to the degree that I can do what I do now. But like you, yeah, I've had those moments where, you know what I mean? You know, I was looking how to make a box of Kraft macaroni and cheese last a week. You know what I'm saying? Which, you know, right. Again, is even more horrifying when you're, you know, you got this, you know, you got a kid with you, and I'm like, all right, how the fuck do I do this? I'm not getting paid to do this. So, you know, at different points in time, you know, I worked 3 jobs. I did whatever I had to do, and you make sacrifices. But the other side of it, and what's working, is this kind of, again, people from these different little circles are connecting. You know, they're supporting each other on shows and stuff like that. They're kind of using social media. They're producing their own stuff, like what you're doing. You know, bands like Bonded by Darkness, bands like Frail, and a lot of others are, you know, starting to make a mark into it. And they're doing it without the traditional commercial approach. But that's how it was done way back in the day. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know, I mean, you probably remember the first time you heard the first Iron Maiden album?
Oh, yeah. You know, I'm behind the ball on that, because the first thing I think I heard from Iron Maiden was "Stranger in a Strange Land." So,
but you know, but there's 1,001 analogies. You know, somebody would turn it on. You know, they would be like, "Hey," you know, they'd have a cassette tape or something to be, "Hey, check this out." You know what I mean? Or you heard it on on a college radio station. You know what I mean? We didn't have social media. We didn't have the internet. It was all organic.
I used to do that. I used to have a ghetto blaster beside my bed with the cassette tape in it. And where I lived on the East Coast was it was on a border town, a border island actually, called Campobello Island. And the only way off the island was over a bridge that went into Maine. And then you had to drive back around to get onto mainland Canada. So I was born, and I was born in Machias, Maine, because that was the closest hospital. So that's why I'm a dual citizen, and that's why I move freely between U.S. and Canada. But we only got 2 radio stations, and I hated both of them. But every once in a while, when the weather was right, around midnight, I could get a radio station in. It was like CBC Canada or something. And after 12 o'clock, they would have all of these crazy bands on. And I would sit up at night in my bed in like junior high.
Oh, yeah, I remember those late night shows. My mother used to lose her fucking mind, because I would wait for those. There was one, it was a WNEW show out of New York, and they would play stuff like Merciful Fate, Iron Maiden, you know what I mean? And some of the, you know, the early metal stuff that you weren't hearing anyplace else. You know what I mean? And when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, where do I go?
Yeah. I mean, I heard Ministry, Stigmata. And if you listen to The Exorcist with like the feel of the drum beat, the that's like hugely inspired by Ministry. And that's one of the bands that I heard, you know, at 12 o'clock when I was supposed to be in bed for school the next day. And I was sneaking the ghetto blaster up by my ear and with my finger on the record button, ready to try and capture something for all of these cool things that I hadn't heard before.
I got to ask you something, because this is something I did as a guitar player. When I got my first electric guitar, I didn't even have an amp. So My uncle showed me how to wire a 1/4-inch jack into the smaller headphone jack on the cassette box, and then you kind of set the tape up funky into record mode. And I used to play through that little system because I didn't have an amp as a kid.
I think I had done that through my grandmother had a record player that had like a just like a power amp section.
Oh yeah. The old tube ones, right?
And so I used to do that, but I never had any nice amps for so long. I was buying these like Sears secondhand, of course, not even new. I couldn't even afford the new ones from Sears, but I was getting these solid state guitar amps that had no distortion, and I was daisy chaining them together and probably ruining the fucking things.
But it was fun. You got to admit. I mean, listen, I remember that was so much fucking fun. You just, and especially when it's new. I mean, that's the beauty of music. When you first dive into it, it's just these endless possibilities. And like we found ways to make it work. I mean, famously, that's how the Beatles started. They were just using shitty equipment, you know what I mean? And they were just doing what they were doing, and then they became who they became. I mean, it's like any journey. It has to start somewhere. But again, I want you, because I want to get some of this music in here, and the one that I want to put out here is one of your newer ones, obviously, Black Divine. I want you to tell everybody a little bit about it. I'm going to pop this one full screen so they can get the experience, because there's two dynamics in here. One, it's a great fucking song. I think you really nailed it with how you kind of blended some of the different influences, but really made it powerful. But also the visuals they're really, really strong. So I know there's some dynamics that influence that.
There's a lot about this. So initially, I wrote the song and I did like the vocoder vocals and a bunch of weird harmonies to kind of just give it this very robotic prosthetic. At the time, I felt that was being kind of stylistically flamboyant. To be honest, I've grown to dislike it. I've actually re-recorded the song with more like traditional style vocals, and we're gonna re-release a remix and remaster the video as well.
Oh, so you really are a musician. You're your own fucking worst enemy. You second guess everything you do, because I fucking love the track.
Yeah, thank you. We're not getting rid of anything. We're going to keep all of the first versions up, and we're going to put it in an album, and it's going to be called Demo Days, except for we thought we'd just put like a lowercase n in brackets behind the O in demo, just to kind of play on Demon Days, kind of, I don't know.
Nice. No, but that's a good twist on it.
I recognize that, and I know that some of the things that people I love absolutely despise are some of my favorite works, so I would never get rid of that. But I am going to do like the remix of it, because I also was kind of behind the ball on the production for it, because we had a metal injection feature that was slated to happen, and I was really on a time crunch for that. And so I did the best I could at the time, and naturally, idle hands, I went back and opened it up, and I was just like, oh dude, I could have done such a way better job on this. And because everything is in my power to do, and I have my recording rig and everything right here, of course, I did it. But
listen, I will submit that's how you know it's real, because anybody who does it praying behind the ego, they don't care. It's just give me. You're like, no, this isn't the best I can do. And I mean, you use some very choice words. I do that all the time. Shy and others around me, they'll be like, what are you, fucking high? And I'm like, probably, but that still despises the point. Yeah. You know what I mean? I know I could do this. I know I could do that. And that's some of the real paradox for musicians, especially musicians who are empaths and write from their experiences and their feelings, is that we're always second guessing it. We're always looking at it from another angle. We're thinking about this, we're applying that, and shoulda, coulda, woulda, and that shit
We're
never ends.
we're trying to articulate a feeling. You know, as crazy as that sounds, we're trying to literally sonically replicate something that feels the way that we felt or that we were trying to espouse when we did that. And so, you know, it's just it's a natural progression. And if you're ever completely happy with anything, I don't know.
I'm getting better at it. I'm trying to find a better balance, because if I don't, and what I did for a while is I just won't fucking release it. I'll just let it sit in the archive and I'll look at it, and I'll just it'll be like this cathartic relationship where we fucking hate each other, but we really want to hook up. You know what I mean? And it just can't seem to pull the trigger. So I let the people around me kind of, you know, take a little bit of that weight, but, you know, also to some degrees, you know, it depends on, you know, what the song, you know, means to us too. So I guess it's always that context in play.
And with that song, speaking of the meaning, the song was about me, and just, you know, I've always been a weird kid. I was never normal. My first 10 years of school, I lived in 8 different places. I went to 8 different schools. I was never not the new kid. I never had, you know, the things, and a lot of that, I don't feel sorry for myself. I wouldn't have it any other way, because I feel like that gave me the depth.
But you still carry scars. You still carry scars. Listen, truth is truth.
And we have to be careful with that, because as I learned a couple years ago, you know, I hang on to a lot of stuff because it drives me. You know, a lot of my angst, a lot of my trauma from things that happened when I was younger to me, I carried them, you know, very close, and wouldn't let them out, and almost, you know, wouldn't let myself heal cathartically to a point where I was afraid that if I healed myself, that my musical conviction would disappear, you know. And I suppose there is some truth and some possibility to that, but you know, I got to a point where I kept so much in that it nearly, you know, and that's where you end up with songs like Suicide and things like that. But, you know, I've always been a weird kid, and I'm
no. See, listen, this is where we have to correct the thinking, because I'm a big proponent of the conditioning dynamic. We're all products of it, whether we like it or not, and it starts when we're kids and stuff like that. But these words, like, I don't think you're fucking weird. I think you're cool. I think you're unique. I think you're creative, and I also think you're very honest. And I think, again, and just humbly, you know, my opinion, just like my asshole, but, you know, that analogy. But this is what we together, I think, have to focus more on. Not fucking all the things that separate us, divide us, that make us less than, but taking words and saying, you know what? No, you're not fucking weird. You're not these things. Just because somebody else perceives you that way, that's not you. It doesn't reflect you. It doesn't reflect me. Now, granted, I have, again, a little bit different sidestep with it, because being a single parent, I saw firsthand trying to raise a son by myself, and coming from a toxic family dynamic, I got lucky in the fact that I emulated my mother. You know what I mean? So I had some of her hippie gypsy types of things, but I had the deep punk metal angst and just like, fuck you, I'm going to beat the shit out of you kind of thing. And then having a kid forced me to kind of, okay, I gotta dance a little bit lighter, you know, and I stopped riding motorcycles. I stopped doing shit that, you know, could theoretically make an orphan. But also in the same analogy, I had to apply how I acted, because that's what we learn from. We see the things that people do, and as children, we mimic them. And conversely, when people tell us we're stupid, or that we're fat, or we're ugly, or we're this or that, and they keep just hitting us with it, eventually we start to reflect that, and we think that that's actually who we fucking are. So I submit to you that you're not fucking weird. Like, again, I'll take you any day of the week versus the Father Flanagans and the rest of these fucking, you know, assholes in disguise.
But I will tell you, I'm weird. But
well, listen, if you want to wear it, if that's where
the-
you're comfortable, I just always make it a point because I know for a lot of people, and I see this all the time, and it's part of the reason why I do what I do, is nobody, or let me rephrase this, not many people are willing to step up and say, you know what, no, fuck that, call it out. You know what I mean? You know, I use the analogy a lot of times with, you know, issues that relate to women. It shouldn't have to be women all the time coming out there saying, hey, don't pull your dick out when it's not asked for. Or, hey,
Right.
let's not tell women what to do with their bodies, because I guarantee you every guy under the fucking sun, if women were to come back and say, hey, we're going to fucking now regulate your dick, they're going to, you know, they're going to swarm like a bee nest. Right. So we got these double standards. We have these things that don't serve anybody. You have both ends of the spectrum just spitting this bullshit, and especially when it's framed from hatred or from this weird disconnect that, you know, oh, well, just because somebody said something on Facebook, this must be, you know, it's just like, what are you, fucking stupid?
You know what it is? Do you remember going to, of course you remember, you've been in the front at a concert before, at a metal concert, and it's just like everything sways. Somebody pushes on one side, and then everybody gets pushed off balance.
Oh, yeah, it's the mob mentality. Right.
And then somebody gets pissed off on the other side of the floor because they've been pushed, and so they push back, and then, you know, there's just a whole bunch of people pushing back and forth, and you know, that's what we are on social media. And I guess I should clarify, when I say weird, I'm weird for ways other than any of the things that you probably think that I'm referring to. I'm just, you know,
you got a special box of shit that you keep to the side that you don't actually share with people. Because now, listen, we all got that. To some. Listen, I think anybody, if they're truly going to be honest about it, we all have that, because we're afraid. You know what I mean? That's part of the conditioning, that people aren't going to love us. They're not going to accept us. They're not going to like us. If somehow, you know, they know that I dress up like a wolf and, you know, I go howl at the moon, or whatever the fuck the case may be.
If you saw me waiting for coffee for the Keurig to make my coffee, and some of the dumb shit.
Oh, I saw that post. You did the Reverend post with that little thing, and you were referencing it. I think that was probably a close approximation, right?
Oh God, I don't even remember what that is, but
it was one of those coffee Keurig things, and you had shared it about, this is what you go through in the morning type of thing.
Yeah, I get really excited about food because I've been through so many times in my life where, you know, I've been homeless 3 times. I've gone without food for, I think 4 days is probably the longest, but and just been through different states of attrition and things like that. And so I still, to this day, I am just like super thankful, and the novelty of having food and regular coffees, like it's never worn off.
It's fucking magical, isn't it? Yeah. And that's beautifully said. That's you see, that's real humility, because most people don't get that. You know what I mean? They've never had to dance in that end of the spectrum. They've never had to worry or, you know, have to go through all the little side effects that happen. I mean, I'm sure the Surgeon General does not recommend going 4 days without food. I mean, I know the human body can handle it. Obviously, you're living testament to it. But in the same analogy, it makes us grateful. It makes us more aware of the things that we do take for granted. Listen, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to pop, because I know there are people who want to see this, even though you hate it. But I will. Okay. I'll play the other one once you get it released. I promise you, I will do that much.
Absolutely.
So, everybody, sit back, enjoy Phantom High's Black Divine, and then we will be back.
Let's go.
this cat like a brisket. It's just too fucked up in the world to stay. But I can't die when I'm bleeding out, cause the bitch in the mirror's reviving me.
So yeah, welcome back. We decided to kind of double tap. Peril and I were talking a little bit, so to continue that conversation. And it's important to note, again, when people come out and they share their experiences, and especially when it's framed behind music, it's very personal. And those elements, many times, they're dark, they're painful, and not always meant for public consumption. You know what I mean? So, we had that kind of, okay, how do you feel about it before bringing it out here? And Peril graciously is like, oh yeah, no, I'll talk about anything you fucking want. So we were kind of getting into the dynamic of how certain elements between, sexuality and the illusions, the perceptions that go around with it, especially for women, and then within the dynamic of music and trying to be a real person, how that really has not only been, experienced by her, but her perceptions on it. So Peril, I'll let you, as they say, explain yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's a, it's such a broad topic, and it's so, there's so many things into it, but it was very simple for me. All of the things I've always found a strong connection to sexuality, sex, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's always been connection, a connection, sorry. And I've never really, the drugs thing, it just missed me, and I think maybe because of some of the stuff that went on during my childhood with my parents, I had a strong roadmap of what not to do, where that's concerned. But the sexuality has always resonated, to be honest. My very first conscious memory, and I know my age because I know the place where I had that memory, and I know where we were living at that point in time, and I know how old I was. I would have been 2.5 or 3, and my first memory is getting in trouble for trying to wear my mother's clothes at like 2.5 or 3, and like there's never been a question of that duality or those things. So the only thing that questioned it was, the paradigm of the social structure at the time, and you keep thinking that this is some type of a, you're not thinking this is an aspect of me. You're thinking this is some type of sickness or perversion or whatever,
or fucking demon or some stupid shit like that, right?
Yeah. Why do I like pretty things? Why did I want rainbow sneakers when I was little? And I'm not even talking about like the symbolism for the rainbow or anything like that. I'm talking about, I just liked pretty shit, and I just, different things resonated with me. And it was, I loved G.I. Joes and Transformers, but I was obsessed with Barbies and building condos and like just different things. It's always been there. So I guess at some point I got tired. I got tired of trying to be, it's so boring.
You didn't want to live behind the curtain. I mean, the classic Wizard of Oz analogy, you were like, fuck that, you're coming out.
And here's the funny thing. I never, I always, of course, the 80s resonated with me, and glam. I was like, this is the fucking coolest shit ever. Maybe this is me, right? Maybe this is what's going on with me. Maybe I'm supposed, and then grunge happened and I was like, well, fuck, there goes that. So, there was always those things, but it was always kept internalized. And when 2016 came around, and there was a number of different things that kind of were the catalyst for Phantom High and who I am as Peril and different things like that. There was a number of different things that brought that into play. But when it did, and I became the character, at some point, a couple years in, I was like, wow, I'm really fucking good at playing this character. It's almost too easy, to the point where when the lights went down, I started to have anxiety, and I'm like, what's that about? And that's, at some point I realized that the part that I was playing was actually the real me, and
I was just thinking that's what tends to happen. We tend to wear the mask that really kind of reflects us, and then at some point, you know, you hit that moment of conscious awareness, or, you know, the epiphany, you know, whatever word you want to slap on it, and then all of a sudden now we have this new reality staring at us. And I know you use that to some degrees within your words and your imagery about that conflict between the two, trying to find the balance.
Absolutely. And I was watching a show called The Pyramid Code. It used to be on Netflix. I don't know if it is anymore. It depends, I guess, on where you're at. But it's all about, you know, ancient Egypt and different things like that. And so they had some people that are families that knowledge is passed down through, and basically a lot of the miniseries is routed around the things that they say. One of the things he said in that series was, he talked about divine feminine and what that was, and how they didn't really have as much of course there's male and female, obviously, but there was, as far as who you are, there was different aspects of femininity that, you know, were categorized by, you know, like artistry, music, and fashion, and different things like that were
they were reflective of the people of the time, of the culture, but they were just that. They were perceptions, and then they somehow became, you know, scripture, for lack of, and literally to some degrees became fucking scripture. We know scientifically, and this is the insane thing, and this is what I use when confronted by, you know, people who are, you know, as my mother likes to say, fucking square, that we know from the science within how genetics and how biological life evolves and adapts, that there are little nuances. We're all unique, but, you know, we share a lot of common dynamics. You know, we all breathe air, you know, we drink water, etc. But the little things within DNA coding, and especially when it comes to frameworks of sexuality, and we've seen this throughout history, that it really isn't as simple and cut as dry as we like to pretend it is. This is not to say, again, that the exception is the rule per se, but if you look at it honestly and remove the rhetoric, remove the conditioning, remove all the other bullshit, there are plenty of examples in nature, and repetitive examples, where these dynamics, they cross over. You know what I mean? And that, I think that may, you know, again, at least to some degree, I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, how a person feels is how a person feels, regardless, again, if we understand it or not. But if we're going to find the common ground to be like, hey, let's not make people less than, let's not make them different, I always tend to lean to, hey, let's look at it for what we know now, you know, because what was magic 200 years ago is fucking technology now, and we're just limited by our perception and our understanding. So as things continue to change, we learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that here's the thing, is that everything is super complex. There are so many elements, you know, down to just actual molecular structure and the things below that we haven't. Everything is so complex and it's exhausting. So, like, I understand people's desire to put things in a box and to not overcomplicate things, and to be like, oh my God, I have to have a foundation somewhere where I can just say, this is the ground. And this is so that I don't have to be thinking about what's in the ground and what the ground consists of. And it's exhausting. And you know, we all have different tolerances for introspection and, you know, different things like that. But there is a complexity that you have to acknowledge when you start holding people accountable to being one, you know, a binary Boolean 1 or 0. Like it's not that, and it isn't, you know.
Well,
things are complex.
It's ridiculous because, again, you know, if we're going to be honest, the dynamics of how people choose to love and express themselves. People every day, they choose to wear makeup, they choose to dress a particular way, they style their hairs a particular way, they get tattoos, they get piercings, they get augmentations and stuff. None of it is any different. We just like to be like, well, because I don't understand this, we're going to demonize it. But in the same analogy too, just because you chose a particular path to walk doesn't mean you're hiding in the shadows waiting to fuck us and convert us like the Borg. You know what I mean? Like you're just going to start assimilating. And it's just like, you know, in the same analogy, just because I choose to express my love a particular way doesn't mean I want to share it with fucking anybody else. And nor do I give a shit, you know, again, unless you're trying to fuck me. Not you literally, but you get where I'm going. Unless it affects you somehow specifically.
Like, quickly.
Yeah, well, you know, that's what happens on these shows.
No, I'm just.
No, that's good. But you get it. We need to have a more lighthearted, honest approach to it, you know, and comedy is a great way to kind of smooth some of the rougher edges, you know, depending upon, you know, because listen, you and I both know we can't have this conversation with Father Flanagan, because Father Flanagan's more interested in molesting little boys than really having a conversation about true sexuality.
Because they've been put into a binary Boolean box.
But listen, but it's the double standard. So unnatural. You know what I mean? It's okay to express, you know, it's okay to have the Pornhub and, you know, do all these things. And most guys are like, oh, if it's two lesbians, that's great. That's fine. We want more of that. But anything else outside the box, all of a sudden it's an affront to God, or it's a fucking perversion, or all these other things. And I was like, no, man, it's like, get the fuck out of the closet and wake the fuck up. You know, and that's the narrative now.
But and that's the way that it should be, you know, is that you just be what you feel. But, you know, the premise that somebody is going to see me at a you know, at a formative age, you know, formative time in their development, and be like, oh yeah, it's absolute lunacy unless that was already there to begin with. And it's like, you know, we had clowns at birthday parties, and I never saw a clown and was like, oh fuck yeah, that's what I'm gonna be, you know, like this is, you know, there'd be a whole lot of clowns, wouldn't there, like in the world? Like, just, I mean, there are, but not not
to the degree that they're all like hanging out in big groups, you know, except maybe in Las Vegas, but you know, that's Vegas, so it's a different world there.
But that was a thing, you know, just to wind it back around to Black Divine, was the part of me writing that song was 3 or 4 different perspectives. One, in the verses, I'm talking about how I feel, you know, and this is whether you're talking about Peril or just me in civilian attire as I conduct myself. You always feel off, and you always feel like people are looking at you, and that you're trying to adhere to some, you know, expectation or code of operation that is imposed by you by societal structures and different things like that. And that's fun, but that's what the verses are about. And then the pre-chorus is a little bit of my catharsis. And I'm just, you know, one of the things I say is, you know, we are nature. And then the other thing is we are legion, you know, because we're all the same people, but we're all nature. We're all, like, these are all things. There's nothing unnatural about anything. You actually can't really do anything unnaturally off of instinct, because that by definition is natural. So, you know, and Black Divine was a culmination of the divine feminine and the repressed feeling, you know. And when I put on the mask, honestly, we have a lot of occult imagery and stuff, and I'm actually agnostic. Like, I'm not anything other than I just have my own beliefs, and I believe what I see, and I believe what I feel, and, you know, I try and come to some type of understanding between the two. But in that, you know, Peril kind of became almost like you would call a form of possession to me, where I felt like I was possessed, so that when I put on this mask, I became, you know, this thing, which we already discussed. I later come to find that it's more me than any type of outside force imposing itself on me. But the bathtub scene in the video was really peril saving me, because the only thing that kept me going through a lot of my depression and anxiety and a lot of the trauma that I experienced was the artistry and the music and the imagination and the, you know, just the theatrics and just all of those components. They were there to give me a place. And so times when I felt like phoning it in and just being like, you know what, I'm done. I don't want to be awake anymore. I don't want to, you know, I just don't want to be alive. And this artistry, you know, was there to pull me out of that and to make me excited about being alive and to give me hope and a place to dream and just so many different things that sound cliche or pretentious, but in the truest sense of the word, like they were literally that. And so the scene in the bathtub is literally my self-conscious talking to myself. You know,
I mean, that's real magic, you know, and sometimes magic is dark. You know, that's the truth. You know, people don't, again, like to have those conversations because it either scares them or it threatens some other dynamic that they're comfortable with, like you said, because we become conditioned, we get comfortable and stuff. But, you know, again, and I know this having danced through my own, you know, things, having gone through addiction and recovery and being a single parent and everything in between that, it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of strength to just even vocalize these things, because we're taught, we're taught not to. We're taught to stop it. You're weird. Don't be emotional. You know what I mean? And when you get dismissed, and more importantly, especially for high functioning empaths, and I look at it like this, weaponized empathy is a real thing. Just like radiation is. You can't always see it, but it still has a fucking effect. So regardless of the dynamics of who's at fault, if you're in a radiation zone and the people around you are fucking radioactive, by default, guess what? It's going to fucking affect you. And then you're stuck having to now deal with these things that you had no control over, you didn't fucking want. But yet, okay, here we are. I still have to deal with it because ultimately, at the end of the day, you're the one that feels it. And a lot of people, again, I'm going to try and reframe this in the hopeful. The old wolf in me, it's just like, fuck humans. They suck. You know what I mean? Just let them blow themselves up so we can just come back out and fix this shit. But I'm going to play the words of my witch in my head and be like, no, we're going to approach this with peace and love. But you get where I'm going. It's tough. And I know, especially for you, because of some of the insanity that's out there, I have to imagine, especially going out there and performing the way that you do, that it does open the door into some of the other stuff. Listen, I know as a guitar player, you know, I had drunken women crawl up and grab my dick in the middle of a show. I have to imagine you have experienced at least some of the other side of the coin in presenting, you know, not only the style of your music, but how you perform.
Yeah, and fortunately, you know, one of the things that comes with walking out on stage in a song, you obviously have gone past the point of giving a solitary fuck about anything. So when those things happen, it doesn't even register on my, like, there's a moral and ethical aspect of it, of course, that you have to at some time address on even if you don't care yourself, on behalf of, you know, people who don't want that. Like, you have to establish this. But for me, I just don't give a shit because I have no ego, like, at all. And so, you know, somebody will come up at the show and they'll grab me by the ass, and I'll just look over and I'll be like, yeah, dude, like, get it in, get all you can. Just go buy a fucking t-shirt or buy the album or something, like, whatever you got from that, just pay it forward.
So you don't let it fuck up your groove. You actually take it and you repurpose it to serve at least some lesser evil in the moment. That's actually pretty cool. See, I'm not as good at that. I tend to, like, especially when I play, I go into the zone and I get off the fucking stage and I get the fuck out. I don't want to deal with the other stuff, you know. And again, for me, it's like being in a room with like 1,000 different radios all on different stations playing at once, you know, and it can be fucking overwhelming.
Yeah. I just, you know, I'm kind of an agent of chaos as far as like, I've got my own personal Wi-Fi chaos emanating around me wherever I go. It's almost like I'm a Wi-Fi hotspot for chaos. And so, and I've come to peace with it. And it's just really funny to me because, you know, we'll go home at the end of the night and I'll be like, yo, dude, did you see that fucking guy that was grabbing my ass all night? Like that was wild. Like that was funny. Like if he only knew me, you know, if he knew really the amount of attrition and different things. And, you know, when I lived in Florida, I was there 2 months. And by the end of 2 months, I had already somebody attempted to carjack me. I've been stabbed 3 times. I've been shot at, you know, I've lived under underpasses. I've done it, man. You know, like I've done all the shitty jobs. I've done commercial fishing in the North Atlantic. I've done scaffolding in Florida. Like, I just don't give a fuck about anything. Like, there's nothing you can really do to me anymore. And that was part of the freedom. Like, I was just like, at some point, all of those things, I was like, why be anything other than exactly me? Like, what do any of these things mean in the end? And just send it, you know, like.
No, listen, that is, you know, very, very, you know, I appreciate it. I respect it. You know what I mean? It is, you know, a custom made defense system. So I give you props for that. You do what you have to do. But I've seen a little bit of the other side. I've saw like what you did for Valentine's Day. You made it a point to with what you did on Valentine in your post to basically put love out there. So there's a part of you, despite the chaos and all the other stuff, that is love. You know what I mean? And dude, you don't hand it out freely, but in the same instance, you do try and encourage it in your own kind of way without it. And I thought it was very, very touching in that element because your choice of words was really about the framework. Hey, if you feel alone, guess what? I'm here to give you love.
Yeah. And I mean, because that's what, at some point in my life, I needed that. You know, when I was living by myself and I had no money, I had no food, I had nothing, I had no prospects of anything. And I was alone. You know, my girlfriend that I was seeing at the time, she left me high and dry and went back to her family, and I got stuck with the cat and my car with a bad transmission and the job that just let me go and the apartment I just got evicted out of. And, you know, that was one of the loneliest times in my life. And I just remember that. Right. And so I know there are people that are going through those types of things and at those depths as we speak. And I just want to be that one person that, wow, if somebody had just shown me any ounce of compassion or kindness or empathy, you know?
Listen, I think that's an incredible success story because ultimately, again, you know, you've taken the words and you put action behind them. I mean, all this stuff that you've been able to do, you know, I got to tell you, it's impressive, you know, and it's heartfelt, it's raw, you know what I mean? And again, it's unique in that you have framed it from a couple different angles and you've done it in a way that, you know, at least to me, and I know a lot of the people that I've shared it with and what I've seen in response to the people who are following you and listen to the music, it's very honest. It's very real.
Thank you. And, you know, before, like, I don't want to depart because the conversation we're having is very interesting, but I would just like to put a pin in that and just, I just want to thank you for some of the incredible fucking compliments that you've given me. Like they're very touching and I really appreciate them. I just didn't want to veer off of the
no listen it's appreciated. Listen, I'm old school. I'm kind of from the George Carlin school of language. I speak what I see and what I feel. I try sometimes to be cognitive, and I recognize that not everybody's going to be at the same level, and maybe, people got this, that, and the other thing. But, and I'm sure, you can appreciate this to some degrees, having seen how things have played out. I've had this conversation with my mother. She was an original, hippie, gypsy witch, you know what I mean, during, the 60s. So I came up through that stuff, and I've seen the potential. I've seen what we can do when we're not, fucking spazzed out with the stuff. And I've gotten angrier to many degrees with how certain things have played out, how we continue to weaponize sexuality, how we continue to dance around rhetoric and double standards, and more importantly now, how it's just, this prepackaged illusion that they just keep trying to shove down everybody's throat. So, me, I'm compelled. The Brooklyn in me is just like, fuck that. I'm not gonna stay silent anymore.
Speaking of George Carlin, I absolutely fucking adore George Carlin, and I go back and I watch some of his stuff from time to time. It's not an accent, but the way that you speak actually reminds me, as soon as you mention his name, you speak very much like George did.
My witch jokes a lot of times, I don't like dancing with the dead. That's her thing. But I have a whole cast of characters that live inside me, just as I think you have a cast of characters that kind of dance with you. Most of us who are creators, who are kind of walking these unique paths, tend to also dance in the more fucked up, darker, stranger places. But it gives us a unique perspective. So I tend to, again, it's part of my conditioning. I have this magic, if you will, and I've learned now how to use it, but I wouldn't be able to, just like you said, if it wasn't for the people around me. So I'm constantly cognitive that, I have to give back. I have to give back. It's the old Knights code, to some degrees too. Part of that dynamic is taking care of those people who can't, even in the face of all the other bullshit, even if everybody else. And listen, I've had people that were in my life that are no longer in my life because, I stood up and say, yeah, no, that's fucked up. Put your dick back in your pants. Or like, yeah, no, I don't give a shit what it says in any fucking book. God did not come down and tell you a fucking thing. Okay. And I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to subscribe to it. And I'm no longer going to be, I guess you could say, apathetic about it. My kid's older. I justified it for years because I had a kid. And it's like, I got to protect the kid and blah, blah, blah. My son's older now, and, he's his own person. He's like, Dad, fuck him. I'm like, okay, I'm free. I literally like, okay, now I can say and do what the fuck I want.
Absolutely. And speaking of, witchcraft and different things like that, I don't know if you knew this or not, but I spent the better part of half of my adult life living in the Black community. And so living surrounded, like my adopted family, like everybody and everything, the culture entirely around me was all Black people, varying from, there was people of Jamaican descent, Haitian descent. African
you got voodoo
descent,
in you.
And one of the people that took me off the street when I was homeless, her name was Doreen, and I kind of regard her as my adopted mom. And she's Jamaican and born in Jamaica and moved here. Strong accent. She's had Orishas all over her house. And she was into Santeria and voodoo. And, every Monday night she had her rum and her cigar, and she would go and, puff smoke and spit rum into her, her people. And, she taught me a lot, so much, and so much of who Peril is.
But you also know, like we do, that magic is actually real. The part that fucks it up is because, like a lot of things in life, it doesn't define itself in the way that people want, not unlike how Wi-Fi works or how radiation
Yeah,
is. Again,
no,
just
it's
because
not.
you
It's
can't
not
see it. Right. I think you're going to listen. I really want you to hang out with this community. I know you're busy. You got your, stuff that you're doing, and we respect it. We want you to keep playing music. We want you to play shows. And I'm going to make it a point, and I want to say this before I forget and we get caught off. A lot of what I do, not just the podcast, but WRFZ, the Under My Skin for Life Foundation, and a lot of the groups and the stuff, I'm using these dynamics with some others out here to, kind of jumpstart the music scene. And, bands like Bonded by Darkness and others, and I definitely want to keep doing. So if there's any way that we can support that, and I'm going to, something we'll talk about down the road, but we want you over here on the other side of the lake is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, I'm at your disposal. I'm down anytime. Like I will make time.
Yeah. And I'll hook up with Tams, because I Tams has been all over the chat. She absolutely loves you guys. Quote unquote from Tams. One of the best performers I've ever seen. The whole band is just incredible on a stage. That's from Tams.
Oh, that's super sweet. Yeah.
And listen, I haven't had the luxury yet of actually physically being there, but I've seen some of the stuff that you have up there. And I featured, the show that you did at the Bovine Club and a couple of the other live things I've been playing, because I've been tagging you in it.
Yeah.
Again, for whatever this is worth, and anybody that follows me knows, I'm about quality, not quantity. I'm not like a lot of, and I don't begrudge some of these people out there that are like, hey, everybody sign up on my list. I'm going to play all your music on my show. I'm like, what the fuck, man? Yeah. You got like 138,000 people now spammed out.
Yeah.
And all it is an attention. They want the likes. They want the shares. And it's like, 99% of these bands are just, what the fuck?
Yeah. It's not enough for people to palletize. And, it's just too much. You need to focus and, cover those numbers, but cover them gradually, because otherwise,
it's not real. It's an illusion. Organic is always better. Don't get me wrong. It's slower. It takes a lot more work, but you've been putting in that work, and it reflects in your music. And again, I had this conversation with Josh Pitts from Bonded by Darkness. There is really, I think, more to be gained by focusing it that way than just flooding it with all this bullshit, because that, again, it doesn't help anybody. All it does is, especially with the clubs and promoters. I was talking to Tams before the show. There are a lot of fucking promoters out there. Very few of them know what the fuck they're doing. And even some of the ones that know what they're doing, they are fucking used car salesmen. They're not in it to help the bands. They're in it to fucking profitize themselves. And the bands are the ones that always get fucked, and not in a good way.
Absolutely. We have like three or four that we go between that we trust. There's a fellow named Dwight Hybrid, Steve Hogue from the Rock Pile that Tams knows, and Noel from Inertia Entertainment. And like we stick with and then there's Save Toronto Music Venues. There's a circle of really solid people here. But speaking of across the lake, our destination is the U.S. I love the U.S. Like, despite any political affliction that's happening right now, like, that is where my heart is.
You mean the part where we're ready to have another fucking civil war because we got fucking used car salesmen fucking running the show?
God. Yeah, I know.
Go ahead, say it, because I will if you don't.
But it's the mecca of everything that, like, that's where I want to be.
Listen,
and,
we have a great country. We have great people. There's great people across the world. We could all do better. There's more that keeps us together. There's more that we have in common than not, but we have to get better. And, some of it, again, people have to, like what you're doing, what I'm doing, what Tams is doing, what a lot of people do, Shia, people are speaking up. They're taking the smaller circles and they're building bridges between them. The old analogy, strength in numbers. You know what I mean? We can do more together than we can't without. But the other analogy is that it's very, again, organic. It isn't these, overblown, types of things with, millions of people. They're small little groups that are coming together, and they're working on this and they're working on that, and they're doing it within the local music scenes, and then they're building off of that. We've been able to find, again, it's not Madison Square Garden, but one of the places I would love to get you down to, and it's a good place, I played there a few times myself, is the Stone Pony in Asbury Park. I think that would be a really good venue for you guys, because there's a good community down there that is very similar to what we have here in Rochester, and to some degrees what you have in Toronto. You know how this goes. There are the circles,
Yeah.
and then there's fucking everybody else.
I'll tell you this though, and this isn't like blowing smoke up anybody's ass. Like I love Toronto, and I definitely have the people in the scene that are family and some of the greatest people I've ever met in the scene. But I also know that when I go to Detroit, when I go to New York, when I go to LA or Chicago, when I go and I see those, I know that's where my heart is, because those are my people. And I know that is, I don't know. I kind of lost the point of what I was saying, but
well, I mean, it's where we relate, the connections and stuff. And let's be honest, again, as a musician, you want people to hear your music. It's not wrong to have at least a little bit of ego in the dynamic, because you're giving up yourself. So it's just like cooking a meal. You want people to eat it. You don't want to fucking just cook it for no reason and sit there and watch it go bad. You want people to enjoy it. You want to share it. And it is the nature, unfortunately, of the music industry that to push beyond those levels, you got to go to where it's happening. That's the reality. And that's what we're trying to rebuild here, because this community, again, especially post-pandemic, really got fucking hammered. It got hammered, but back in the day, Ozzy and Randy Rhoads, started their tour off out here, Dio's from out here. You see where I'm going? There's a lot of history, and every place has history, but it's the local underground dynamic that has always fueled it. And that's what we're working on rebuilding now. And I know that's part of what you're doing. And again, a lot of other people.
We would already be over there regularly playing shows. The problem is the stipulations for bringing a band from an international act into the country. It's $2,000 a head for each of our members, and anybody that we bring in. Like if we bring a tech and a merch person in, that's $2,000 a head on everybody we bring in to play a single fucking show, and it's just not realistic.
This is where you and I are going to have a lot of fun, because we figured out ways to not deal with that stuff, because we have people who backline and take care of all that shit. So all we got to do is, you guys are coming over here for a fucking trip, and we'll make sure you have everything else to fucking do it. It's stupid. Again, it's fucking ridiculous. And this is what's killing it. Also to some degrees, hey, listen, people got to make a living, they have to be able to survive, but it's kind of like insurance companies. If you're not actually bringing anything to the table, if you're not actually creating anything, why are you fucking here? And more importantly, why am I fucking paying you?
Here's the real bitch, and it's still kind of, I'm still salty about this shit, but we were supposed to play at the Whiskey in LA on the 24th of June. And just because of the difficulties in getting paperwork and the unionism involved and just different things like that, and it was just not tangible for the promoter. I think they opted to go and just have a couple local bands that sold tickets street side, to get their quota or whatever. And so we ended up not playing it. We're going to absolutely play it, but it's still kind of, I'm pretty sour about it, because it's the Whiskey, it's LA, it's like the heart of fucking rock and roll for me. And, everything that I was weaned on, it's like, oh shit, what, Guns N' Roses played there before they were known, like anybody, the Doors, Jimi Hendrix, you name it. Like all of those guys that they've
Oh,
played
listen,
there.
I would love to have an opportunity to play there. And listen, I get it. You know, when I played at the Stone Pony, first show I did at the Stone Pony, I had my son on stage for me, and it was a magical experience. I didn't give a fuck who was in the audience.
yeah,
I was on stage with my kid playing at the Stone fucking Pony.
Yeah.
So I get it. I know that feeling.
Yeah, that's got to be one of the most nostalgic bucket list moments I think, you know, that you could possibly describe. I completely get it. I don't have any kids. All I have is a collection of stuffed rabbits, but like
Yeah,
I
but
said,
even stuffed rabbits need love too. It's all relevant, man. You know, you know as well as I do that you know these constructs of illusions that we create on love and connection. Listen, I know people who love their cats and dogs more than they'd love any person on this fucking planet. And you know what? If that's what works for you, again, as long as it isn't carrying over on me, why should I even have a say? You know, again, it is the simplest, I think, basic form of respect. You know, if it's not hurting me, why should I hurt you? You know, again, it's not rocket science.
So many other things too, right? It's everybody thinks you would hear that like, oh wait, this person has like 30 stuffed jellycat rabbits that they,
Listen, Shia's got she's got authentic fucking voodoo dolls all over this goddamn studio that stare at me and talk to me every time I try and do something. So yeah, you know, yin yang, this, that, potato, potato. You got a bunch of stuffed rabbits, you know, and that's what works for you. That's actually beautiful because you can talk about it honestly. You know what I mean? It doesn't fucking matter what anybody else thinks, but
I also know through self-analysis, I know where that came from, right? Because when I was 5, my mother left my father because there was abuse and alcoholism and violence happening there. And he hired a private investigator to track me down because he was mad that she took me. And one day when I was walking across the street to school, a van pulled up, opened up a door, grabbed me off of the street, put me on a train to Montreal, where I lived with my grandparents that I had only ever met once before in my life. And for 2 years, I didn't have any friends. I lived in a place that was foreign to me, and all I had was a pile of stuffed animals that were my friend. And so I know where the things come from. They didn't appear out of nowhere, but
you know what? Thank you for sharing that. That is incredibly deeply personal, and you know, for whatever this is worth, you know, I always feel as an empath, you know what I mean? You know, those moments, you know what I'm talking about. When people share their pain, when they share their experiences, it touches us whether we like it or not. But also the flip side of that is that it takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage to put that out there. And it's important, you know, again, I think at least, to frame it just like you did, because context is what defines it. You know, it isn't just like you're just some strange person that just, you know, he's got a stuffed animal fetish. No, as a kid, he got fucking abandoned.
Because the principle applies, you know, to a broader spectrum of things too, right? Is that, you know, you start to, as you get to know people, you start to understand that these weird things that you think are quirks or whatever, maybe they're not so weird, you know. Maybe there's a reason or a very
just maybe
tangible...
they're not weird. I mean, there it is. We're back to that again. It's not weird. There's a fucking reason. This is reflective of a trauma that you experienced as a child. And you know, let's really be blunt. If we're going to take it the next couple of steps, and we know what's happening around us, for a lot of children, that ends up leading to much worse, darker places. They end up killing themselves. They end up going down all these other deeper paths, and you walked some of those fucking paths. So in many ways, you did the only thing that you could do was find a way to adapt, to survive. So when you put it in the true narrative, it's not fucking weird. It's incredibly powerful. It represents a dynamic of strength, but it also reflects the dynamic of hope, because you've been through this. You've come out the other end. There are people now that are in those shitty, dark places that you and I both know of that don't have that don't feel that anybody gives a shit, that there is no hope, there is no path forward. So that's why it's so important. It's also why I make it a point. I do this and I put it out there and I archive it, because you never know when something may touch somebody. You know what I mean? It may not happen today, it may not happen tomorrow. We may not be there to see it, but it's still important. It's there. It represents something. It isn't just, again, a fart in the wind. It's tangible. People can go back to it and say, no, these are Peril's words. These are Peril's experiences. These are my experiences. These are Dominique, Shia's, everybody that interacts that has come on here over the past couple of years reflects part of their lives, their experiences, and their hope and strength.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I don't mention these things, obviously, and I don't perceive your response to that in any way, what I'm about to articulate. But, some people, they list off their list of traumas or whatever. They wear it on their sleeve as a way to kind of some form of self appreciation or whatever. And, maybe we've got reasons for that too, but I only want to articulate these things and mention these things because I want people to know that the things that I write about and the things that I say, they mean something. They're not just pulled out of, I'm not just like, okay, here's my group of words and things that I want to touch on. I want people to know that when one of the songs that we write, if we're so lucky to have that happen, resonate with them, that they're in good company. They're with somebody that understands, that these things happen. Because when we launched Black Divine, for example, on Metal Injection, you should never read the comments, but it was our first time. And of course I read all of the comments. And one of the things that somebody said was, oh, poor me, mommy and daddy never gave me all the things I wanted. It's like, that's where you think you heard this song and that's where you thought.
Oh, listen, somebody's always going to be fucking triggered. They're going to have, because it's just like the other dynamic that you mentioned. People want attention. They don't care if it's fucking negative attention. They want to interject themselves into the dynamic, into the conversation. They want to be heard.
And also, they've let, these various things and internalized capitalism, they've sacrificed, a lot of these people have sacrificed so much of their happiness that it's turned them bitter, and they don't.
Very true. Yeah. Very well said.
I don't even blame them. I'm not mad at them. If anything, I always want to try and understand more. I mean, there's going to be people that are, they just want to watch the world burn,
Yeah.
But there's always those people. But for the majority of people, even the ones saying these hurtful and hateful things, it's from a place where, they're crying out for help as well. And I just hope that any of the things that they hear or any of these explanations, if anybody felt that way about me or about people like me, I just hope that that's the only thing that they take away, is that, we're not, largely speaking, like any demographic, we're all closer to the middle of things, more balanced than the extreme opposite of whatever side you lean to would have you believe. And, I strongly believe in trying to reach who I can, for whatever that's worth. Right.
Well, listen, you actually pulled the wish out of the other room to.
Peril, I just wanted to say something real quick to you, if you don't mind. I wanted to tell you I am just so inspired by you. And I wanted to say you are extremely courageous, and your journey, it's harrowing. And the fact that you've gone from there to here and are able to speak your truth in love, you're inspiring. And thank you for coming on tonight.
You're welcome, and thank you for saying those nice things. I genuinely appreciate that.
Listen, you must have hit a chord because she's been deep in the Diablo 4, and let me tell you, there's not much that's going to get her off that right now. She's on a killing spree, so the fact that she came in here, and especially, again, during the podcast, because she and I kind of have this thing, so she was compelled to be like, fuck you, I'm going to have my say, I need to say this, so you hit a chord, so very well done. I'm going to keep the show going a little bit longer if you're cool with it. That's a beautiful thing about doing my own thing. I can do this as long as I fucking want. So as long as you're cool with it, we're going to keep it going tonight. One of the things that struck me, and it may be a little bit where you and I differ. See, and my brother Chris Miller knows this, and he's out there. And I want to shout out, much love to you, brother. He's godfather to my son. He and I have kind of danced through a lot of stuff for years, and you know, he kind of reflects his uniqueness. My brother is covered literally in so many tattoos. It's like in the hundreds. He's a walking fucking billboard. He's one of those guys. But the reflection sometimes, you know, that tolerance is beautiful, and I salute you for it. But the other side of the coin now, and I think again, to some degrees, what has gotten us in trouble is allowing certain things to play out without calling out, you know, AKA analogy. You know, if somebody has a viable context, and context is an important word because not everything is the same, even words, depending upon how you use them. So, you know, for somebody who doesn't know any better and maybe went through some traumas and they have this thing versus somebody who's, you know, out there preaching, you know, some Jesus stuff, but on the weekends is hanging out in an airport bathroom stall looking to get blown by random men. You see where I'm going? When you start hitting into the double standard, or when you really start now creating, you know, these ocular dynamics, you're encouraging hate, you're encouraging hypocrisy, and you're dancing now into other people's feelings, their lives, because it carries over. You and I both know that most of what we deal with is because of other people's demons, their bullshit, their fears, their confusion, their hatred. So I was just curious, how do you balance that?
Yeah, I should clarify, when that starts to be invasive or hurtful towards other people, that's the end of it. You know, that. All right,
so you got a little Brooklyn in you too somewhere.
Yeah, as individuals, you know, it's a different thing. I guess what I'm saying is, if I see somebody that I think, you know, I see things, I see pain in, I see hurt in, and I see, I want to speak to that person, you know, whether it's artistically or whatever. I want to make people happy. I just don't. There is definitely a line that you don't cross, and that's when, you know, I don't make excuses for it, and I would say that it's a lot like not disciplining your kid, and that's the way that I feel about a lot of these.
No, it's a good analogy. It's a good analogy.
Extremism. Like, if you let things slide, it goes. So I'm absolutely not condoning, you know, anything like that. So I'll give you an example of a thing that happened. When I worked in Orlando, there was a fellow on one of the temp crews that I worked on. I was homeless at the time, and I was homeless and working the entire time. How does that figure? I had shit credit, and I couldn't get approved for an apartment, and it was just, I was stuck in between not making enough money to save to get a first and last month's deposit down, and I ended up in the street. And then what happened was, I ended up not sleeping enough. I would get off. I was working in shipping receiving at JCPenney in Altamont Springs, and not having a place to sleep at night after 2 weeks, finally caught up, and I imploded at work, and I quit. And then I ended up staying under an underpass, you know, down by Cayley and I-4 in Orlando. But there was a labor pool there. I got on a labor pool, and I started working my way back out of homelessness to the point where I got a room. I saved up. I went halves on a friend for an apartment, and then I eventually got my own place, worked myself out of it. But while I was working on one of those construction crews, there was a fella named Rich Seppi, and he was from New York. I can't remember where he was from. And he had a big old swastika tattooed on his chest. And, you know, him and a couple of the other guys, they were in the KKK, and they spoke about it outright. And, you know, we were a mixed work crew there. There was Hispanics, there was a Haitian, there was Puerto Rican, and, you know, me. And they immediately gravitated towards me because of my pale complexion, and I think they thought that I would just fall in. And I already, as I mentioned, I lived in the Black community, and my friends, my people I considered family, and I just wasn't having it. My grandmother on my father's side, she came from Ukrainian descent, and her mother was Jewish Ukrainian. And even though I don't practice any religion, when they came to me with that, I just lied and said, well, I'm Jewish. Just because I didn't want that association there.
Right, throw the grenade right out there for what it is. There's nothing more a racist fucking loves than just, hey, run away from the Jews.
They were like, you can't be Jewish. You're cool. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what does that even mean? Like, what do you think a Jewish person, you know, do you think it's this cliche, you know, because honestly, most of those people, they've never even met a Jewish person. They only have perceptions or, you know, different things like that. So, and I kept the facade going, and eventually they were like, you know what, we don't care. And, you know, I damn sure cared, but
listen, sometimes you have to deal with a thing, particularly in the moment. See, I would have gotten my ass beat because I would have done something stupid. Like I would have pulled my dick out and been like, see, look, that's a Jewish dick, and just triggered them to the degree just to get it over with. That was my trauma response, was going through it. You know, when I was a kid, I had long hair because my mother was a hippie. So a lot of the other kids around were, you know, they were either jocks or they were, you know, from these upper class type of dynamic. So I was a target. And once I learned how to fight and I realized that I could fight well, it was like a drug. I was just like, yeah, give me a reason to just let out all of my fucking demons and hatred and all the horrible shit that I was experiencing. You know, my old man, and Chris Miller knows because he and I had to dance this together for many years when my son was growing up. My father was a deep, violent, misogynistic alcoholic. Like my mother had to literally dip. She had to like run away. And true story, my father literally went out drunk with an axe trying to find her because he wanted to kill her. And that dynamic, and again, more horrible true story.
Very similar
The model that he created, my kid brother killed his girlfriend, cut her up, stuck her in the trunk of the car, and is now serving life in prison because he emulated that. That's how it happens. These generational things get passed on. Fathers teach their sons, and then the whole thing goes to fucking shit. But
you only know what you know at a formative age, and that's what develops your character, and all of the parameters that you live by is what you perceive to be reality and acceptable, you know, or unacceptable, depending. And so this guy, you know, like 2 or 3 months in, I had to work on the work crew with him because that was that. And he was this massive dude, like just a tank. He probably weighed close to, you know, 300 pounds. He was 6'4" and just massive. And at some point it came out, I don't know how we were sitting in a car on lunch break, and he was like, dude, you're not even really Jewish, are you? And I was like, no. And he's like, you just told me those things in the face of that because you despise, you know, Nazis and fascists and all of these things. And I was like, yeah. And I don't know what happened, and it won't happen every time. It probably won't happen most times, but whatever that did sparked something in him. And I remember him coming to work one after a long weekend and opening his shirt, and he had the swastika lasered off of his chest, and he just dropped all of it.
Listen, that's a great analogy because, listen, we've all done something stupid at some point or another. That's how we learned. It's unavoidable. And you could make a case, and, you know, my brother Chris Miller knows it because he's covered in tattoos. You know, you're hanging out someplace, you know, you drink a little bit too much, you're with a bunch of fucking rowdy people, they put hoods on, they start telling stories about the good old days, and, you know, you got 30 of them around you, and they're like, hey, yeah, everybody, we're going to tattoo swastikas. You know, between the alcohol and the fear, probably, yeah, you know, maybe he got the tattoo. Maybe that's his context and didn't reflect who he really was. And it wasn't until that moment that he realized what it did to other people. I mean, there's a case to be made. It's a great story.
You know, like he really believed it, and I think he got it done willingly on his own. Like he believed in the idealism or whatever of it, but whatever happened, our interaction and the amount of, you know, tolerance that I had showed him individually, not tolerance towards that, you know, extremism
to
or
just
any
him
of
as
that.
a person and working together, right?
As a person, and as who he was, and who he was, I saw it in him, and you know, I never had to say, dude, this isn't you. Just the interactions we had and the way that we interacted brought that out, you know, and that happened. And I don't know where he is today. I haven't seen him in, you know, 20 years, but I often wonder about him because the last thing I had heard was that somebody had insulted his brother's Puerto Rican girlfriend, and he had thrown them through a plate glass window. And that's the last thing that I had heard. And I was like, wow.
Oh, wow.
You know?
What a great way to end the evening. Literal, a Marsalis Wallace Pulp Fiction moment that somebody threw through a fucking plate glass window, man. Because you know don't fuck with Marsalis Wallace. Okay.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Well played, really. That was very cool. Listen,
I always think of that, and you know, that was a lesson for me. And you know, I'm not going to lie, I've attempted it with other people that I've met, and it's never worked again. But
listen, I've had those scenarios where it's gone badly. You know what I mean? And I give you credit where credit's due.
But I'm just saying, there is things inside of us, and there are, you know.
No, it's a really cool, hopeful note, because it does at least give us something to hold on to. It says, you know what? Until you know, what do you really know? So if we're even just a little bit more willing to be tolerant, we're just a little bit more willing to listen, and in your case, you know, be patient, even if that means we have to, you know, we got to wear a mask and play the part. Sometimes that is the lesser evil, right?
Yeah. You know, the mask is symbolic in a lot of ways, right? That's
right. No pun intended, because you know, literally that's the visualization that you use. And I think it really does. I mean, again, Shia was like, you know, a couple of times, she's like, she's hot. And I'm like, all right, calm yourself fucking down. It's not that type of thing. But you listen, I think you use it in a way, and I got to be honest, again, as a man, I think it's very tasteful. You know, what I used tonight's episode, I called it the class of Phantom High for a reason, because I really do. I feel that you have class. You're not, you know, listen, it would be so easy for you to spin this and weaponize it. You know what I mean? Do the whole, all right, you know, I'm going to frame it through a Pornhub kind of fucking context and just drive the lowest common denominator. You know what I mean? And that's what a lot of people do, you know. And again, I don't begrudge it, because I understand the other side of the coin. Hey, everybody's got to survive. They got to make a living. That's what you're going to do. That's what you're going to do. But, you know, if I want porn, I want porn. If I'm going for music, you know, I don't necessarily want porn in my music. You see where I'm going? So there's that fine line between creating visual elements, and they can be reflective of sexuality, but without it being so ridiculous. Like it's not what your music is. It's just part of the presentation. I guess maybe that's a better way to put it, because you listen to your words, you listen to the songs that you write, and they're anything from that two-dimensional element. They're just not.
I cannot wait for you to hear the new stuff, because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the stuff that you're hearing now is about 8 years old. And it's just, we've been waiting. We've had these other things on the burner and the potential. And so, as of 2021, we started recording with the producer, who pretty much just took my songs and did all of the qualitative things that you need to do with the elements and the recording quality and the, outboard gear and all of the different things, and made those songs. We didn't go in the studio and have the producer rewrite anything. Like, I just took my songs in there and we recorded them professionally, and he knows how to make the candy that I wanted to put into it. So these new songs coming out, they're absolutely just Phantom High, but they are the new stuff. In the meantime, when I started singing, I had never sang before. I didn't know how to sing. I just made musical sounds with my voice, essentially, was the thing I think I always said. But, at some point I found, oh shit, I can actually really belt. I can actually really scream. I can actually, really do these things. And playing the amount of live shows we did was, part of that process. But so the new stuff coming up, I'm so proud of it. And I know you always hear bands, they always say, oh, the new stuff, because the nostalgia has it. But even these new songs, I've been sitting with them.
No, because you already outed yourself earlier, and I know how to read these dynamics, and I've seen it in some of, how you interact with people and stuff like that. You are your own worst critic. And the way you chopped up your earlier stuff, if you're coming out like this, then yeah, I know that it's got a shine to it. So I'm really looking forward to that. But listen, again, some of this is contextual. Again, you've been through a lot of stuff, so you're still evolving, you're still growing, and in many ways now you're tapping into your magic at deeper, different levels. So, it would stand to reason that your music is obviously going to reflect that.
Yeah, I'm so excited about it. And, also the other thing is, yeah, we have influences of like Korn, and in this moment, I don't know if it's going to be as apparent with the new stuff coming out, because, I'm trying to find things that haven't happened yet. Like I'm drawing from weird places in my musical history. And even I went back and I was like, what eras haven't been touched, with these new, every time there's a new thing, and it's like, the latest thing was new wave, synth wave, all of this stuff, which I love. And I'm so pissed that, we're not going to get in on time to, but there's no point in trying to get in on something that's happening now, because by the time your music gets released as an unknown artist and hits people, everybody's going to be like, oh, that's just another version of this. It doesn't matter if you wrote it 5 years
I mean, humbly, and for whatever this is worth, I would say, truly, I like you for who you are. Do what speaks to you. Don't even worry about what the fuck everybody else is doing, because you know as well as I do that half the time it's a fucking illusion. It's just this reflective parroting that chains down until it burns the fuck out. I like the dynamics of what you do, and I think it is unique in that. Don't get me wrong. I understand, you're approaching it also from the dynamic that you're looking at the commercial end of it as a performing band. I have the luxury. I do most of what I do now as a collaboration, and the only fucking shows I play are for charities, because I'm just that disgusted with it. But I use dynamics of things with the radio station, with the other bands and performers that I know. And we've been doing this for years with our foundation. We leverage it to basically get the things done that we need to get done to actually fucking help people and to to the best of our ability, keep elements of a local music scene alive, so that way other bands get an opportunity to play. They can get their music out. People actually know something. I mean, again, it's not a perfect thing. You know what I mean? I don't have, you know, 10 million followers, but, you know, it gets passed down. Some people share it here. Some people share it there. They hear it on the radio. You know, maybe, hey, somebody who knows somebody, this is how it works. That's the organic element.
Yeah, I think I just looked and I'm like, you know, who is out there right now doing what, I don't know, what Ozzy Osbourne did? Like, where in music do you find music like Ozzy always had this really perfect symmetry between pop format songs and metal and hard rock, and you know, there's really, that's a really potent combination. And I'm like, you know, we're not. I write pop songs, right? You know, like my songs are written the same way that, you know, a Max Martin or Red One or whoever would write a song, but I'm like the Alien Ant Farm cover of Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal. Like I want to have
nice
that type
analogy.
of song, but I am just going to write the pop song myself, like, and then fucking destroy it.
Well, I mean, you hit on some of it. Some of it is cyclic. I know over here in Rochester, you know, it's the cover band thing again. You know what I mean? And that's just reflective of the post-pandemic. The clubs that actually managed to survive, you know, they're just trying to stay the fuck afloat. So, you know, this happens periodically within, you know, the scene, depending upon, but also some of it is also reflective, like you said, of that commercialized corporate, you know, parasitic kind of, you know, this ugly thing that has been growing for many years, you know what I mean? And, you know, you can use so many now. You look at what MTV was when it originally started, you know what I mean? Which was just, you know, fucking music video, you know, Beavis and Butthead, you know, to becoming, you know, drunken orgies of, you know, Jersey Shore and 16 and pregnant.
Oh, God,
you know what I mean? And you want to talk, it's like, it's Cronenberg. It's like this de-evolution.
I remember being from a time where the thing that we look for from, say, metal music, it wasn't coming from metal. It was coming from rock and roll. Like the attitude was coming from, you know, like Joan Jett or
Iggy Pop.
Pat Benatar. Like I don't, like, things were edgy, but they were, and I remember that, and I'm like, wow, that was like, you know, things weren't so extreme that normal people couldn't, and that's why we get a lot of the compliments about, well, you know, this isn't normally my type of music. I don't even know why I like it, but I can see it's good, and I actually like this. And I'm like, well, you might not know, but it's because it's a pop song, and there's heavy elements in there, but they're done to taste, and it's more of, you know, like my most listened to artists of last year on Spotify, as much as I loathe streaming and, you know, you're stuck in the paradigm you're stuck in, was Pat Benatar and Faith No More and fucking, like, Miley Cyrus, I think, you know, because she came out with that album.
Oh, listen, you can't even pay me to listen to Miley Cyrus. I don't begrudge her anything, but I have become so disenchanted with the state of quote unquote popular music. You know, I have become eclectic. You know, I'll go to like Dave Brubeck and I'll listen to some old jazz. I'll throw some fucking early Merciful Fate on if that's the mood I'm in. A lot of times I find myself falling back, you know, to like early Megadeth and early Metallica. And then, you know, like you said, Ozzy, you know, either be it the many incarnations, like I love Sabbath with Dio. I didn't like anything that happened after. Like I didn't like the Dio band, but I thought Rainbow and those two Black Sabbath albums were just fucking magical. But there's also the time period of my life, you know, I was a teenager, you know what I mean? They came out. I was just starting to play shows, you know what I mean? I had the whole same as you. I did sex and drugs and rock and roll, and then more drugs and more
Right.
alcohol, and then more drugs and drugs and drugs. You know what I mean? And literally went down the fucking rabbit hole because that's what everybody around me was doing. And that's it, you know, it made me accepted. People loved me, you know what I mean? And to some degrees, you know, it was survival. You know what I mean? I'm not sure how else you can frame it. You know, we kind of do what we have to do sometimes in the moment. And you've been on the other side of it. I had a point when I hit bottom, you know, I was living out in the fucking woods. You know what I mean? Because I had just blown myself apart so badly, and I was so shot out with the world that I literally wanted to go Jeremiah Johnson. I wanted to just go off into the hills and just never see another human being again. You know, and again, people help me. You know, Chris Miller was one of those guys. And if you're still listening, brother, much love to you. Who helped me was like, yeah, no, you know, no, this is not how it works. Let me show you a different path. Let me show you a better way. And he did it, you know, just out of that pure love for helping another human being, you know, and it had been a long time since I had experienced that. And, you know, not unlike a wild animal, I was a little hesitant. I'm like, fuck you, I'm going to bite you. But
yeah,
it worked, you know.
There's so much attrition and sadness and different things and pain, you know, like, and I don't know what to do about a lot of that. I don't know how to solve any of those things as much as I, you know, espouse all of these ideals and mantras.
We keep it simple,
like
one
that.
person at a time. That's all you can do. Where and when you can. That's it. That's the truth.
It's such, because of that, you know, much of the world is overwhelmed, and that's where you get a lot of the crab mentality from. Is like, why should this person do this when I can't even do this thing? You know, false equivalency. Some of the things aren't even equal or relevant, you know, and some of it's semantics, some of it's, you know, factual omission to prove a point.
Or some of it is weaponized empathy to serve some other fucking agenda.
Yeah, but it's, you know, we're also overwhelmed that the people that can put themselves aside to offer anything to you, consolation, any type of just comfort, it's such a rarity that it does resonate in a different way. So, you know, when your friend Chris, you know, opened that part of himself to you and offered that kindness, you know, there's not, people are dealing with their own shit largely, and they don't have the ability, they don't have the bandwidth to be able to extend that to somebody. So when somebody does that, that's a really special thing.
But it is how it worked. You had similar moments in your life, and I think that that's what defines the people that eventually not only become family, you know what I mean? Because you and I both know, you know, family is an overused and a really undervalued kind of word.
It is,
but like many words, you know, that context becomes reflective now of the experience, how it translates, and then ultimately, you know, everything else that is born of it. It is hitting 10:30. I got to tell you, I usually don't push the podcast, but this has been really cool. I would love to have more of these conversations publicly or otherwise. I think you got a lot to offer. I'm really looking forward to the new music. And we're definitely, we're going to get those radio friendly ones so I can get you on FM radio.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's what we got to do. We got to break through the fucking narrative. And I joke about this on my radio show. I always pick at the FCC. I let them know that they're listening to me, and I'm fucking watching them too. But over here on the fucking podcast, I can just be like, yeah, you can kiss my fucking ass because it's stupid.
Right.
You know, you and I both know. Again, everybody can access anything. You know, a 5-year-old child can go on their computer and literally go find donkey porn easier than you can have a conversation or play certain types of music on commercial radio. And it's just stupid. It's just like they're basically saying, hey, let's just kill it. But everything else over here, just run wild. And it's stupid. It's outdated. But you know, again, that we have to jump through these little hoops that they've created We have to leverage them, and we have to work them to get the message out. Kind of like what Monty Python did back in the day. The BBC didn't understand anything they were fucking doing, and they snuck all that shit in, and people loved it. You know what I mean? They followed the old Shakespearean narrative. Most of the men played the female parts, you know, and nobody ran around and lost their fucking mind and be like, oh, they're coming. You know what I mean? Everybody laughed. They had a great time. They're revered and loved.
Out of Benny Hill's playbook.
Oh my God! Well, listen, Benny Hill took it to the other extreme. His show was just basically titties everywhere. That was the theme of Benny Hill.
Most of that cast was gay.
Well, but that's what's crazy. You know what I mean? Again, I've always been a big fan of Eddie Izzard, and he has framed a lot of his comedy around some of those preconceived notions and some of those, you know, obvious double standards. And, you know, we look at it depending upon how somebody else is framing it. You look at MASH, Klinger, you know what I mean? His whole shtick was dressing up as a woman because he wanted to get out of the fucking war. You know what I mean? Right. And again, nobody, you know, lost their fucking minds, or, you know, there wasn't any of this. But now we have this weird narrative because a couple of people just decided somehow, here's something good to distract people, because that's really... Yeah,
they've politicized it in order to sleight of hand, you know, and every time these flare-ups happen, you can almost watch these, you know, corporate tax loops or whatever, you know, just flying through the fucking Senate while everybody else is broke and angry. And you can also look at all of these times in history where there were depressive economies and different things like that, and you can see that society turning on each other. All of these conservative values, and I mean the extremist conservative values, because I have conservative friends, and I have, you know, religious friends, and I have, you know, people from every demographic, you know, aside from, I don't have any Nazi friends, and I don't have any, you know, anything like that.
I have that, and I don't hang out with Scientologists. I'm really big on that. I go after them all the time. I poke them with a stick. Yeah, I'm like, come get me, Tom Cruise. Come get me.
Yeah.
No, seriously. Listen, I'm a big South Park fan, and I love the episode that they did when he's hiding in the fucking closet. I'm like, get the fuck out of the closet, Tom. We all know already. Stop pretending. Yeah. Don't hide under this bullshit, you know, imaginary, you know, hey, let's create a fancy tax shelter and we'll call it a religion. Because that's what it is. And the guy who fucking did it openly admitted it. So everybody pretends.
No, you already knew he wrote science fiction, for fuck's sake.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like context, man. Let's just, you know, let's step back and have an honest conversation.
You know, a lot of these guys are,
But now it's weaponized because it serves some other narrative. And don't get me wrong, I think we can all agree, you know, that they're bad actors in every element of our culture. It doesn't matter if you're black or white, if you're straight, if you're gay. Yeah. And just because, you know, maybe you believe a particular thing doesn't necessarily make you a Nazi, but also in the same instance, because maybe if you have some views over here on the left side, doesn't make you a fucking communist either. And there are common grounds, like everybody experiences love. So that's a good place to start. Say, hey, don't you like feeling good? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just start there. You know what I mean? Just throw the rest of the shit out. Keep it simple. But yeah, it doesn't serve, like you said, the corporate narrative, because again, as much as we are divided, they just keep getting away with the shit that they do. And that's what they do. Yeah. And that's classically been the fault of every fucking civilization since the beginning of recorded time. You look at Egypt, you look at Aztec, Mayan, you look at Rome, you look at the Ottoman Empire, you look at France, you look at Russia. Listen, we fucking fled Europe, came over here under the guise of, you know, freedom, and then proceeded to just basically almost wipe out the indigenous population in the name of God. You know what I mean? Like, I identify a lot with the Native American thing, and I look at that and I say, you know what? We're all talking about this shit. You know, what about this?
Yeah, and then imagine, why would they rail against the status quo of well, I can't imagine,
Yeah,
maybe
right. We
because
act all
things
confused.
they film.
Yeah, listen, it is. It's a bad South Park episode. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Yeah.
really? We're just not capable
You
of learning
remember-
anything from our fucking history?
I can't remember who it was. Somebody in an interview talked about seeing the Spinal Tap movie, and they said that it was a musician, a famous musician. I can't remember who it was, and they said that they broke down and they wept through the movie because the even though it was satire, that it was so close to the current state and reality of the way that shit is conducted.
Oh, and listen, that was just that you and I both know that was the tip of the iceberg. That just fucking devolved and it was like something out of a bad John Carpenter movie, what it became through the 80s into the 90s. And not everybody, don't get me wrong.
No,
not everybody went down that, but I'll use the analogy. You look at a band like Motley Crue, which epitomized bad behavior and everything that is wrong in rock and roll. And then years later to glamorize it again in a Netflix special, and back in the day, I liked a couple of songs on the first album, but over the years and just watching what they became, it was just like, no, you guys are a fucking bunch of assholes. You know what I mean? And I've encountered some of these personalities on the other end, and they are really like that.
Yeah. Some of these bands, they become a parody of themselves because they never develop. They only ever stay at surface level, and they don't want to. So they just keep trying to do the same thing, but it's not new. And that's another thing about music. Even if Metallica, for example, made another album that was identical in energy and whatever to Master of Puppets or Ride the Lightning, it will never be the same, because part of the thing that resonates with us is that we lived in that time period. There's emotional nostalgia attached to it. And if they were to remake something new of that nature today, some people would like it, but many of the people that loved that album would absolutely fucking hate it. And I know because it's happened to me with Korn, for example. When Paradigm Shift came out, I took 2 listens to that album, and I was like, nope, I'm done.
Listen,
I don't
it's
know what
tough.
that is.
You know what I mean? Because we like what we like. I'm hopeful. Like I'm a big Queens of the Stone Age fan, and I really have always loved their music. And I was very hopeful, and I think their album it's a good album. You know what I mean? I enjoy it. I've been playing it on some of my shows. Is it everything? No. But also, too, in the same analogy, I was a big fan of them Crooked Vultures, and I thought that was a really cool little side project that they did. So I still have faith within that there's enough people out there trying to keep it real, for lack of, again, a better way to put it.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Black Label Society as well, too, because I know JD through my buddy Tony Rodriguez, and he's a really great guy. He's a great musician. And understandably, obviously, some of their sound is influenced because Zakk Wylde, Ozzy, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But they have really been kind of, again, trying to develop, that new balance between the old and the new. It's the same. I don't know if you're familiar with the band Accept for the past few years, has a new singer, Mark Turano, and he's been a big supporter of our foundation, a really great guy. I never liked Accept back in the day, but I like Accept now with Mark on the vocals. And some people are like that with Iron Maiden. Like, I love the first 2 Iron Maiden albums with Paul Di'Anno. I'm okay with the other stuff. Bruce Dickinson's a great singer. They're a good band still. But those first 2 albums, Paul Di'Anno, will always be Iron Maiden for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. I can see that, and I definitely can. I definitely get that sentiment as well. I should say, what I said about the Korn album, the Paradigm Shift, was that I instantly I just was like, I can't even listen to this shit anymore.
Oh, I'm that way with Metallica. I hate the new fucking Metallica album. I am so disgusted with
Well,
Metallica these days that I wouldn't even buy the fucking thing.
I went about 2 months, and I was doing something, and I'm like, you know what? I'm so sick of listening to everything else. Let me put this album on again. And I could not believe it that I absolutely loved I was like, what in the hell was I thinking? Like, where? Because I love this. And it was at that point I realized that I was comparing it to the emotional nostalgia and the time period. And
Yeah, no,
I
that's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Because none of those things were there, so I instantly got mad at it. But what I realized after I had come to terms with that it wasn't going to be like that, and I went back and listened to it again, I was like, holy shit, this is one of the best albums they've ever fucking done. And that was what gave me I was like, well, what happened? What happened with the 2 listens? Like, what was different? And I was like, oh, okay, now that I've come to terms with that time period and that nostalgia, and now I've gone back and I've listened to it objectively without that subjective expectancy, it's different.
It reflects differently.
So
absolutely. You're right. There are albums that I used to love back in the day that I can't listen to anymore because of what it represented at that point in my life. It's like the old joke about never listen to Pink Floyd on acid. You know what I mean? There's some places you don't want to go to.
It transports you right back to that moment. The smells, the tastes, the feelings, like the anxiety, like, it can absolutely, just as much as it can, awaken good things in people that like the good nostalgia, there's the bad shit too that you can't listen to.
Oh yeah. Listen, we all have our triggers. That's, again, part of the human experience, unfortunately, but again, how we deal with it is equally, if not more important. And, part of the magic, again, with that is that we can share these things and support each other. Many times just having that kind of camaraderie, if you will, somebody that actually understands, oh, you've been through something similar. You know what I mean? We can relate more. We don't feel quite as isolated. We don't feel quite as alone. So to close out tonight's show, I'm going to close it out with one of the other older tracks, Atrocities. Is there anything you want to throw in on that one to kind of close it out tonight?
Yeah, Atrocities is, I wrote that about panic attacks and the stigma behind mental health issues. And so the verses, again, are from my perspective, experiencing, these elements of certain mental illnesses. And then there's the contrast of how we perceive and how we, like to build people up to kind of crucify them. And just, so that's the gist.
Nice.
Of that song.
Listen, I want to thank you so much again. This is officially the longest podcast I have done. So you have now that honor. Hey, listen, when it flows, and again, when it's easy, real, right? You can, this is just like having, sitting down, having a cup of coffee and having a conversation, which is what I really love. I truly, again, I can't say enough. I appreciate not only your honesty, but your courage in sharing some of those dynamics. I also want to shout out a couple of people. I wasn't paying attention to the chat. I was locked up into conversation with Peril. So my sister Leah, Dominique Wong, Jonathan, anybody else that I missed out there, thank you so much for joining us. As always, if you missed part of the podcast, it will be back up on YouTube. Everything is archived on YouTube. You can also go to oldwolfmusic.com, find the links to everything from there. If you ever have any questions or you got some music you want to throw out there or whatever, you can reach me at, no coincidence, wolf@oldwolfmusic.com. Peril, definitely going to have you back out here. I really want to get you out here as well. And we'll find a way, because I think you got a lot to offer. And, again, it is appreciated you taking your time out here to share with us. Thank you again.
Thank you. I had an amazing time. So anytime, and let's work out that.
Well, yes, and listen, come hang out in the circle. We'd love to have you. Strength in numbers. That's our philosophy. You know what I mean? Granted, again, you know, to whatever degree you're able, but we have people that will float in and out from all over the place. We have been trying, I think, again, to some degrees, like what you've been doing, and I see others, you know, to build up those communities organically. So, you know, we should hang out, as they say. Because I don't think you're weird. I think you're really cool. My only concern is I think my witch has got the hots for you, so we'll have to have that conversation offline. Because you know what I mean. There's nothing worse than when a witch is in heat. You know what I mean. There's just no fucking stopping it. And listen, even my mother's lurking there. My mother just decided to jump in the chat. She's one of those really cool kind of. She was part of the original underground scene back in the day, not only music, but, you know, within civil rights and, you know, the whole thing. She used to drag me out to the shows. I'd follow the old timers around, learning how to fucking play. Yeah. Hey, listen, she's the only reason we were able to make it. You know, she was the counterbalance, and you and I have this in common, you know, to that really fucked up male dynamic, you know, that, you know, listen, everybody's got their reasons, but, and I'll say this again, children lead by what they are exposed to. That's what they learn from. So if you're acting like an asshole, if you're a fucking drunk, if you're abusive, guess what? Your children are going to probably reflect that. So it's important to, you know, to remember again that, you know, the words don't mean shit without the action to back them out. Mom, I love you. Definitely go back and watch the show. I think you'll get a kick out of it. We had a lot of fun out here tonight. We'll get you back out here again, and I will continue to promote your music. I'm really looking forward to that new release. And you guys are going to have a new video with it as well, too. So I'm going to play that as well.
I'm going to send you some stuff tonight. But we probably won't release it for a month or two.
Yeah, no, listen, I will respect anything you tell me whenever you guys want it to release. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to sit at home in my underwear and enjoy it. So that's just what I fucking do. But everyone else will have to fucking wait. But yeah, we're working on some stuff too. And, you know, a couple different things that I think are going to cross relate. We will find the common ground. Again, for whatever this is worth, Bonded by Darkness were the ones that turned me on to you. So kind of listen, between our community here, you got Columbus not too far on the other side. You're Toronto on the other side. We're kind of creating this odd little, you know, northern, it's like Game of Thrones. We're like north of the fucking wall. We just got to figure out who's going to be the king of kings out here, and then, you know, just organize our armies around it.
I'm just trying not to end up like Cersei. So
no, you're north of the wall. You're a fucking wildling like the rest of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. No. Well, there ain't no fucking way we're running with those types. Listen, I'm a wolf. You know, again, there's certain things, and especially at this point in my life, I just refuse. You know, I would rather be wrong for the wrong for the right reasons at this juncture. I can't do it, because I look at my son now, and, you know, and again, the only thing that rattles in my head is just like, how can I expect him to hold the line if I can't fucking hold the line? So I'm compelled, and I learned that from my mother, because my mother was that way too. Despite all the bullshit she had to go through to actually survive, you know, and she came up through a period where women weren't even allowed to have a goddamn bank account. You know, we pretend like we're all civilized and advanced, and it's just like, that's kind of a fucking illusion.
If you go back 50 years, she gets dark.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same narrative within communities of color, or within, you know, dynamics of alternate lifestyles, be it sexual or otherwise. So, you know, the spectrum is wide, but the narrative is always the same. It's about dividing us. It's about keeping us distracted with all this other stupid shit. And you get it, and I know you get it. So that makes you a common soul, as I like to say. And I really appreciate you taking the time. And really, again, we're going to push it almost to 3 hours. Yeah, I love this. That's what I love about doing my own thing. I just do whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool. Listen, it was a pleasure. We're going to close it out, like I said, with atrocities. You can check out Phantom High, YouTube, social media. Give them a like, give them a share. Definitely very much worth watching and following. And as you've already experienced, yeah, there's actually a person behind the mask, and a really intelligent, passionate person. And I think that that's a good analogy to end it with the class of Phantom High. So until next time, hey, listen, try and remember, love each other, know that you're loved, and try not to sink into those atrocities. Until next time.
It's all